Yo guys, welcome to Percy and Goddess Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto had to teach Percy chakra, and Percy had to teach Naruto swordsmanship? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Worlds Apart. Fates aligned. The morning sun cast long shadows across Konoha's still rebuilding skyline. Naruto Uzumaki stood atop the Hokage monument, his blonde hair rustling in the gentle breeze as he surveyed the village he had sworn to protect. 3 years had passed since the Fourth Shinobi War, yet the scars remained, both on the landscape and within the hearts of those who had survived. "You're up early," came a familiar voice from behind him. Naruto didn't turn, recognizing Shikamaru's lazy drawl instantly. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, his normally boisterous tone subdued. "Something feels off." Shikamaru moved to stand beside him, hands tucked into his pockets as he gazed out at the village. Kakashi-sensei mentioned unusual chakra fluctuations at the village boundaries. "Nothing definitive, but enough to make the hairs on your neck stand up," Naruto finished, absently touching the seal on his stomach where Kurama resided. The Nine Tails had been unusually quiet lately, another anomaly that contributed to Naruto's unease. "Troublesome," Shikamaru sighed, his standard response to most situations, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his concern. "The Sixth wants you to investigate." "Personally?" Naruto nodded, his blue eyes hardening with resolve. At 19, he had grown into his power and position as Konoha's hero. The Orange and black of his outfit had been supplemented with elements of traditional shinobi armor, practical concessions to his increasing responsibilities. "I'll head out now." East boundary, northeast, near the old Uzumaki shrine. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. "Coincidence?" Naruto's mouth twitched into a humorless smile. "When is it ever?" With a casual two-finger salute, he leapt from the monument, chakra pulsing through his legs as he bounded across rooftops toward the village perimeter. The civilians below barely glanced up. Naruto's aerial shortcuts had become a common sight in post-war Konoha. As he reached the outskirts, that sense of wrongness intensified. The air shimmered like heat waves above desert sand, though the morning remained cool. More disturbing was the silence. No birds, no insects. As if nature itself had retreated from whatever phenomenon was occurring. "Kurama," Naruto murmured internally, "you sensing this?" Within his mindscape, the massive fox stirred. "Something ancient," the Biju rumbled, uncharacteristic caution in his voice. "Not chakra, yet not entirely unlike it. Be wary, Naruto." "When am I not?" Naruto quipped, though he slowed his approach, senses straining. The shrine came into view, a small, forgotten structure of stone and weathered wood, one of the few remnants of his mother's clan. Naruto had visited occasionally since learning of his heritage, feeling a bittersweet connection to ancestors he would never know. Today, however, the shrine pulsed with an eerie blue light that seemed to bend the very air around it. Naruto created a shadow clone without hand signs, a testament to his mastery. "Report back if anything happens to me," he instructed his duplicate, who nodded grimly. Approaching the shrine, Naruto felt a strange pull, as if gravity itself had shifted axis. Chakra flared instinctively around his body, a defensive mechanism honed through countless battles. "What the hell?" he muttered, watching as small objects, leaves, pebbles, even dust, began to float upward around the shrine's perimeter. The stone torii gate that marked the shrine's entrance now framed what appeared to be a tear in reality itself, a vertical rift of swirling energy. Neither liquid nor gas, but something between dimensions. Naruto withdrew a kunai, channeling wind nature chakra into the blade as he cautiously extended it toward the anomaly. The moment metal touched energy, the rift pulsed violently, expanding outward in a heartbeat. "Shit!" Naruto leapt backward, but the rift moved faster, enveloping him in cold blue light. He felt his shadow clone disperse from the backlash, its memories flowing into him as his body seemed to dissolve into particles. His last conscious thought was of Kurama roaring a warning before everything went black. 5,000 miles away and in a reality separated by more than mere distance, Percy Jackson slashed at training dummies with practiced precision. Riptide hummed through the air, the celestial bronze blade leaving faint golden trails in its wake. At 18, the son of Poseidon had filled out his lanky teenage frame. Years of combat had sculpted him into a warrior, though his green eyes still crinkled with humor whenever Annabeth called him Seaweed Brain. His camp shirt stretched across broader shoulders, and scars from countless monsters decorated his tanned arms. "Your left guard is still dropping," Chiron noted from the edge of the arena, his arms crossed over his human chest while his horse half shifted restlessly. Percy grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Old habits. I keep expecting to have a shield." "A swordsman must be adaptable," the centaur reminded him, though his tone was fond. "Though I suppose saving Olympus twice earns you some leeway." "Don't tell Clarice that." Percy capped Riptide, the sword shrinking into an innocuous pen that he pocketed. "She still makes me run extra laps whenever she catches me using sloppy technique." Chiron's expression sobered. "How are the dreams?" Percy's smile faltered. Since Tartarus, his nights had been haunted by memories twisted into new nightmares. He'd become adept at hiding the dark circles under his eyes. But little escaped Chiron's millennia of experience with heroes. "Manageable," Percy answered, which wasn't entirely a lie. Compared to actually being in the pit, dreams were survivable. "Annabeth helps." Chiron nodded, seemingly satisfied for now. "Speaking of whom, she was looking for you earlier." "Something about unusual readings from the beach." Percy's brow furrowed. "Readings? That doesn't sound like Annabeth's usual architecture stuff." "She mentioned consulting with the Hecate cabin," Chiron explained, which only deepened Percy's concern. Magic had never been his strong suit, mostly because it tended to backfire spectacularly around him. "I'd better check it out," Percy said, already moving toward the beach path. "Thanks, Chiron." The centaur raised a hand in acknowledgement, though something in his ancient eyes suggested concern beyond what he'd voiced. Percy jogged across camp, nodding to fellow campers as he passed. Summer session was in full swing. Ning camp half-blood bustled with activity, new demigods learning to handle powers they barely understood, veterans honing skills, satyrs playing volleyball with perhaps too much enthusiasm. It all felt wonderfully, beautifully normal, which, in Percy's experience, usually meant something catastrophic was about to happen. He found Annabeth near the shore, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail as she consulted what looked like a celestial bronze tablet with Llewellyn from the Hecate cabin. "There you are," Annabeth greeted him, gray eyes sharp with that particular gleam that meant she'd found a puzzle. "We've got something weird." "Define weird," Percy requested. "Because our scale goes from mild inconvenience to primordial deity trying to end existence." Llewellyn snorted. "Somewhere in the middle. The mist is thinning along this stretch of beach. And before you ask, no, it's not normal, and no, we don't know why." "I can feel it," Percy admitted, now that they'd mentioned it. The sea felt different. Not wrong, exactly, but as if some fundamental frequency had shifted slightly out of tune. Being a son of Poseidon meant he was attuned to any changes in his father's domain. "Show me," he requested. Annabeth led him closer to the water's edge, where the normally gentle waves of the magically protected camp borders seemed agitated, pushing and pulling with unnatural rhythm. "It started around dawn," she explained. "Tyson noticed it first, said the sea horses were refusing to come near this part of the bay." Percy frowned, kneeling to touch the foam-flecked water. Immediately, images flooded his mind. Currents disrupted, sea creatures fleeing, and at the center, a pulsing disturbance about half a mile offshore. "There's something out there," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to check it out." Annabeth grabbed his wrist. "Not alone, you're not. The readings are strongest underwater," Llewellyn pointed out. Unless Annabeth suddenly developed gills. "I'll be careful," Percy promised, squeezing Annabeth's hand. "Just reconnaissance. If there's trouble, I'll come straight back." Annabeth's expression made it clear she didn't like it, but she understood the practicality. "Fine. But take this." She pressed a small shell into his palm, one of the communication devices Tyson had crafted that worked underwater. "Call for backup if anything seems off." "Define off." Percy echoed her earlier question with a smirk. "Seaweed brain," she muttered, but kissed him quickly. 20 minutes, then I'm sending in the Hippocampi cavalry." Percy nodded, kicked off his shoes, and waded into the surf. The moment the water reached his waist, he felt its power embrace him, reinvigorating his muscles and sharpening his senses. With a thought, he propelled himself forward. Diving beneath the surface, underwater, Percy moved with the efficiency of a born swimmer enhanced by divine heritage. Fish scattered from his path, their thoughts a jumble of alarm and confusion that confirmed something was definitely amiss in his father's realm. He followed the disruption to its source, where the seafloor dropped into deeper waters. There, suspended in the blue depths, hovered what could only be described as a tear in reality, a vertical rift of swirling energy that pulsed with a light that shouldn't exist so far beneath the waves. What in Hades? Percy thought, maintaining a cautious distance. Nothing in his considerable monster fighting experience had prepared him for this. He uncapped Riptide, the sword expanding to full size, golden light mingling with the strange energy before him. As a test, he directed a small current toward the anomaly. The water that touched the rift didn't flow around it as physics should dictate. Instead, it vanished, seemingly absorbed. That was definitely not good. Percy raised the communication shell to report back when the rift suddenly expanded, pulsing outward like a heartbeat. He tried to swim backward, but the pull had become irresistible. Water and demigod alike being drawn into the dimensional tier. Annabeth, he shouted into the shell, but whether his message reached her remained unknown as the rift swallowed him whole. The familiar pressure of the ocean replaced by a sensation of falling through endless cold light. Consciousness returned to Naruto in fragments. First sound, a distant roaring, like ocean waves. Then sensation, hard ground beneath his back, and finally pain, a throbbing headache that suggested he'd been thrown with considerable force. Ugh! He groaned eloquently, seeing his eyes open to an unfamiliar sky streaked with colors that shouldn't be possible, purples and greens interwoven with normal blue in geometric patterns. Definitely not in Konoha anymore. Obviously. Kurama's voice resonated in his mind, the fox's tone dry despite their predicament. Your talent for stating the obvious remains unmatched. Naruto sat up gingerly, taking stock. Physically, he seemed intact. No injuries beyond bruising. His chakra, however, felt strange, present but somehow muted, as if the very air resisted its flow. Any idea where we are? He asked his tenant as he surveyed their surroundings. The landscape defied easy categorization. He sat upon a rocky outcropping overlooking a beach where crystal blue waters lapped at silvery sand. Inland rose forests of trees, with bark like burnished copper and leaves that shimmered between emerald and sapphire with each breeze. Most disorienting were the floating islands visible in the distance, chunks of earth and stone suspended impossibly in midair. Some supporting their own miniature ecosystems. Another dimension, Kurama surmised. Not a genjutsu. This feels too real, too solid. Something or someone pulled us across realities. Great, Naruto muttered, rising to his feet. Interdimensional travel, just what I needed this week. He checked his equipment. Kunai pouch intact, scrolls secure, soldier pills present. At least he hadn't arrived unarmed in whatever realm this was. A flare of unfamiliar energy from the beach below caught his attention. Dropping into a defensive crouch, Naruto observed as Anath. Tear, similar to the one that had swallowed him, materialized over the water. This rift pulsed once, twice, then expelled a human figure that tumbled unceremoniously into the shallows. Another arrival, Naruto murmured, already moving down the slope toward the shore. Friend or foe remained to be determined, but information was valuable, and anyone who'd been transported like him might have insights into their situation. The figure, male, Naruto could now see, staggered to his feet in the knee-deep water, shaking dark hair from his eyes and looking around with evident confusion. He held what appeared to be a sword, though its golden metal was unlike any blade Naruto had encountered. Hey, Naruto called out, approaching along the beach but maintaining enough distance for safety. You Zhu, she get pulled through a weird light thing too. The stranger whirled toward him, sword raising instinctively. He was perhaps a year younger than Naruto, with sea-green eyes that narrowed in suspicion. His orange t-shirt bore unfamiliar symbols, and his stance suggested combat training, though not shinobi in origin. Who are you? The dark-haired youth demanded, eyes darting between Naruto and their bizarre surroundings. Is this you're doing? Some kind of trick? Naruto raised his hands, showing empty palms in the universal gesture of non-aggression. No trick. Name's Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of Konohagakure. I got pulled through some kind of portal about. He glanced at the strange sky, realizing he had no idea how time flowed here, a while ago. Looks like you did too. The stranger didn't lower his sword, but his posture relaxed fractionally. Percy Jackson, he introduced himself curtly. Camp Half-Blood. What's a shinobi? Naruto blinked. A ninja. You know. He formed a basic hand sign, channeling chakra. To his frustration, the energy responded sluggishly, producing only a flicker of his usual blue aura. Huh, chakra's acting weird here. Chakra, Percy echoed, looking perplexed. Like yoga stuff. Now it was Naruto's turn to stare. No, wait, you don't have chakra where you're from. How do you fight? How do you do anything? Percy's expression suggested he found the question equally bizarre. With this, he replied, gesturing with his golden sword. And this, he added, causing the nearby water to rise and swirl around his free hand before releasing it back to the sea. Naruto's eyes widened. Water manipulation without hand signs. Is that a keke genkai? A what now? Percy stepped fully onto the beach, apparently deciding Naruto wasn't an immediate threat. Look, I'm guessing we're from different places. Or realities. Which isn't even the weirdest thing that's happened to me this year. He ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Any idea where here is? Naruto shook his head. No clue. Kurama thinks it's another dimension entirely. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox. Naruto paused, realizing how strange this would sound. He's sealed inside me. Long story. To his surprise, Percy just nodded. I've met stranger roommates. So we've both been pulled to wherever this is. Our powers aren't working right, eh? ND we have no idea why or how to get back. That about sums it up. Naruto agreed, appreciating the practical approach. I was thinking of exploring, seeing if there's anyone else around who might have answers. Percy capped his sword, which bizarrely shrank into what looked like a writing tool he pocketed, and gestured inland. Lead the way, ninja boy. Just so you know, if this turns out to be elaborate trap set by God with too much time on their hands, I'm going to be really annoyed. Naruto grinned despite the situation. If it helps, I'll be annoyed right alongside you. As they made their way from the beach toward the copper forest, neither noticed the ripple of darkness that passed through the sand where they had stood, a shadow moving against the direction of the sun, observing the newcomers with malevolent interest. The forest interior proved even stranger than its exterior suggested. The copper-barked trees stretched impossibly high, their canopies creating a cathedral like space where light filtered through sapphire leaves in ever-shifting patterns. The ground beneath their feet was covered not with typical underbrush but with what appeared to be living crystal formations in pastel hues that chimed softly when disturbed. This place is beyond weird, Percy commented, keeping pace with Naruto as they followed what seemed to be a natural path through the trees. It's like someone took parts of a dozen different worlds and stitched them together. Reminds me a little of the Forest of Death back home, Naruto mused, except prettier and hopefully with fewer giant man-eating centipedes. Percy shot him a sideways glance. I'm sorry, did you say man-eating centipedes? Oh yeah, big as houses. We had to fight through that forest for our Chunin exams when I was 12. Naruto chuckled at the memory, now distant enough to seem almost fond. Good times. They made 12-year-olds fight giant insects as a test. Percy sounded simultaneously horrified and impressed. And I thought Camp Half-Blood's capture the flag was intense. Their conversation halted as both warriors tensed, sensing movement ahead. Naruto slipped a kunai into his palm while Percy uncapped Riptide in a fluid motion that spoke of years of combat reflexes. Someone's coming, Naruto murmured, extending his senses. With his chakra dampened, he couldn't detect signatures as precisely as usual. But he could feel two presences approaching, both powerful in a way that felt neither wholly like shinobi nor exactly like Percy's strange energy. We come in peace, called a female voice, its tone carrying both authority and caution. Lower your weapons, travelers. Two figures emerged from between the crystal formations, women who appeared human at first glance but whose movements held an otherworldly grace. The one who had spoken stood slightly ahead, her posture confident. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with obsidian black hair styled in a practical bob and eyes of such a deep blue they seemed almost violet. Her attire consisted of fitted black clothing accented with silver armor pieces that seemed designed for mobility rather than heavy protection. A circular device on her wrist glowed with runes neither man recognized. Her companion was slimmer, with auburn hair bound in an intricate braid and sharp, analytical eyes that shifted color like sunlight through amber. She wore robes of deep green over what appeared to be lightweight armor, and symbols similar to those on Percy's shirt adorned the satchel slung across her body. Most notably, she carried no visible weapons, yet exuded the calm assurance of someone who needed none. "I am Kira Blackwood," the dark-haired woman introduced herself, guardian of the 13th boundary. "This is Nadia Winters, scholar of convergent realities." She gestured to her companion, who inclined her head in greeting. "And you are very far from your native dimensions, gentlemen." Naruto and Percy exchanged glances, silently communicating the same thought. Finally, some answers. "I'm Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon," Percy introduced himself, lowering Riptide but not capping it. "This is Naruto. Sorry, I didn't catch your full title." "Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of Konohagakure, Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, hero of the Fourth Shinobi War," Naruto stated, his usual exuberance tempered by the strangeness of their situation. "Where exactly are we, and how do we get back home?" Nadia stepped forward, her movements fluid and precise. "You're in what we call the Nexus Dimension, a realm that exists at the intersection of multiple realities." Her voice carried a subtle accent, musical and ancient. As for returning home, she exchanged a meaningful look with Kira. "That's complicated," Kira finished, her expression grave. "You're not here by accident. You've been summoned." "Summoned by whom?" Percy's grip tightened on Riptide, his experiences with gods and titans making him instantly suspicious of any entity powerful enough to pull people across dimensions. "We call it the Devourer," Nadia replied, removing a scroll from her satchel and unfurling it to reveal intricate diagram. S of energy flows between spheres representing different worlds, an entity that feeds on conflict between powerful beings from different realities. It creates these tiers between dimensions to draw in those with exceptional abilities, forcing them to fight while it harvests the energy released. "So we're basically dimensional gladiators." Naruto frowned, the concept disturbingly similar to Aokurama and the other Biju had once been used as weapons. "Not interested." "It's worse than that," Kira said. "The Devourer doesn't just feed on the battles, it consumes the dimensional stability between your worlds. The longer you remain here, the more your native realities begin to bleed into each other, creating catastrophic instabilities." Percy's expression darkened. "So while we're stuck here, our homes are in danger. How long before these instabilities become a real problem?" "We estimate 2 weeks in Nexus time," Nadia answered, rolling the scroll closed. "Which translates differently in your native dimensions due to temporal variance, but the effect remains the same, eventually, irreparable damage." "Then we need to defeat this Devourer and get home," Naruto stated with characteristic determination. "Where do we find it? How do we fight it?" Kira's lips curved in a grim smile. "Direct. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, the Devourer exists partially outside conventional space-time. You can't simply punch it into submission, impressive as your respective combat abilities may be. The Devourer can only be banished by individuals who have mastered skills from realities not their own," Nadia explained. "It's a fundamental law of interdimensional physics. Power borrowed becomes power multiplied across the boundaries." Percy's brow furrowed as he processed this. "So I'd need to learn whatever ninja magic Naruto uses." "Chakra," Naruto corrected automatically. "And I'd need to learn to use a sword like Percy," Naruto continued, understanding dawning. "We'd have to teach each other." "Precisely," Kira confirmed. "The exchange of knowledge creates a resonance that disrupts the Devourer's hold on both you and the dimensional boundaries it's corrupting." "That's the good news," Nadia added. "The bad news is that the Devourer is aware of this vulnerability. It will send agents, Hollow Ones, to prevent your training and keep you isolated." "Hollow Ones?" Percy questioned. "Shadowy entities pulled from the spaces between dimensions," Kira explained, her hand moving unconsciously to a scar visible at her collarbone. They take forms designed to exploit your fears and weaknesses. They cannot be reasoned with, only destroyed. Perfect, Percy muttered sarcastically. So we've got 2 weeks to teach each other our completely different fighting style. While being hunted by shadow monsters, or our worlds suffer catastrophic damage. Just another Tuesday. Naruto laughed, the sound startling in the tense atmosphere. Hey, I've had worse odds. Reem. MBER when you mentioned gods with too much time on their hands. Sounds like we found one. Percy's mouth quirked into a reluctant smile. Fair point. I've definitely dealt with pettier divine schemes. He turned back to Kira and Nadia. I'm guessing you two can help us with this training program. We can provide a safe location and some resources, Kira nodded. Our settlement is about 2 miles north of here. Others who've been pulled from various dimensions have established a community of sorts, some stranded, some choosing to remain as guardians. Others like us. Naruto perked up at this information. From our worlds, not from your specific realities, Nadia clarified, but from analogous dimensions with similar fundamental principles. The multiverse contains infinite variations, after all. A distant howl echoed through the crystal forest, causing the musical formations to vibrate discordantly. Kira's expression hardened as she checked the device on her wrist. Hollow ones, she stated flatly. They've picked up your trail faster than I expected. We need to move, now. Percy and Naruto needed no further prompting, falling into step behind their guides as they set a brisk pace deeper into the forest. Both warriors remained vigilant, processing the implications of what they'd learned while scanning for threats. So, Naruto said quietly to Percy as they moved, I teach you chakra. You teach me sword fighting, and we save multiple dimensions. Simple enough. Just another heroic Tuesday, Percy agreed with grim humor. Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible student. Just ask Chiron, and I'm an even worse teacher, Naruto grinned. Ask anyone who tried to explain chakra control to me. This should be interesting. Behind them, shadows moved unnaturally between the copper trees, flowing against gravity and light alike as they pursued the dimensional travelers with singular purpose. The journey through the crystal forest grew increasingly tense as evidence of pursuit mounted. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, too quick and unnatural to be mere tricks of light. The crystalline undergrowth, once melodious, now emitted discordant tones that set teeth on edge. They're hurting us, Kira observed grimly, checking her wrist device again. Cutting off the direct route to the settlement. We should stand and fight, Naruto suggested. Kunai spinning restlessly around his finger. The constant retreat grated against his instincts. We can handle a few shadow creatures. Normally, I'd agree, Percy said, surprising himself by being the voice of caution. But if our powers are compromised in this dimension, maybe a strategic retreat makes sense until we know what we're dealing with. Nadia nodded approvingly, wisdom worthy of Athena's daughter. The Hollow Ones gain strength from direct confrontation with beings from other dimensions, it's how they feed information back to the Devourer. We'll need to take the path through the floating reaches, Kira decided. Pointing toward where the forest thinned, revealing those impossible floating islands Naruto had glimpsed earlier. It's less direct but offers fewer places for Hollow Ones to manifest. As they approached the forest edge, the true scale of the floating reaches became apparent. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of earth masses hung suspended in the air, ranging from elder-sized chunks to islands that could support small ecosystems. They formed a 3-dimensional maze stretching toward distant mountains that shimmered like mirages. How exactly do we navigate that? Percy asked, eyeing the significant gaps between floating landmasses. Kira smiled, the expression transforming her severe features. We jump. With that, she took 3 running steps and launched herself from the cliff edge, soaring through the air to land gracefully on a floating island 30 feet away. From this new vantage point, she gestured for them to follow. She's showing off, Nadia commented with fond exasperation. There are easier paths, but... She shrugged and followed Kira's example, her leap equally impressive despite her more scholarly appearance. Naruto grinned at Percy. This, I can do. Despite his dampened chakra, the basic physical enhancements were still accessible. He channeled energy to his legs and executed a perfect leap that carried him not just to the First island but overshooting to a second, larger mass. Percy muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a Greek curse. Sure. Make the water guy jump through air. That makes sense. Nevertheless, he backed up, took a running start, and made the jump to the first island. Just barely, scrambling up the edge with considerably less grace than his predecessors. Need a hand? Naruto called cheerfully from his perch. I'm good, Percy replied with dignity, dusting himself off. Just warming up. Kira had already moved ahead, mapping a path through the floating labyrinth with practiced ease. Stay close, she called back. The gravitational fields between islands can be unpredictable. Step where we step. They proceeded in this manner, jumping, climbing, occasionally crawling across narrow stone bridges that connected some of the larger islands. The perspective was dizzying. Looking down revealed only misty emptiness, while looking up showed more floating landmasses occluding the strange geometric sky. As they navigated this impossible terrain, Nadia explained more about their situation. The Nexus dimension exists as a buffer between realities, she elaborated, helping Percy across a particularly treacherous gap. It prevents different universal laws from colliding catastrophically. When functioning properly, it's a place of perfect balance. I'm guessing it's not functioning properly now, Percy observed dryly. The Devourer is a relatively recent phenomenon, Nadia confirmed. It appeared approximately 300 local years ago, though time flows differently here than in your native dimensions. Where did it come from? Naruto asked, easily keeping pace despite the challenging terrain. Kira, who had been quiet during Nadia's explanation, spoke over her shoulder. Some believe it's a manifestation of dimensional entropy, a natural force maintaining balance through destruction. Others think it's a former guardian who became corrupted. I personally suspect it was deliberately created as a weapon that escaped its maker's control. Sounds familiar, Percy muttered, thinking of so many divine weapons and monsters with similar origins. They reached a larger island that supported an actual ecosystem, grass in shades of teal, trees with spiral-patterned leaves, and what appeared to be small animals that glowed from within scurrying into hiding at their approach. We'll rest here briefly, Kira announced, checking her device again. The hollow ones can't navigate the reaches as easily as solid ground. We've gained some distance. Naruto sat cross-legged on the strange grass, finally taking a moment to consult with his tenant. Kurama, what do you make of all this? The fox had been uncharacteristically quiet, observing their new reality with keen interest. Their explanation is consistent with what I can sense, he rumbled. This place exists outside normal dimensional boundaries. As for this Devourer, it reminds me of stories the Sage of Six Paths once told me about entities that exist between worlds. So you believe them? Cautiously, Kurama advised. They've had opportunities to harm us and haven't taken them. But trust should be earned, not freely given. Naruto nodded mentally and returned his attention outward to find Percy studying him curiously. You were talking to your fox friend. The demigod guessed. Yeah, Kurama's been around for thousands of years. I figured he might have some insight into interdimensional stuff. Naruto stretched, rolling his shoulders to relieve tension. He thinks they're telling the truth, but suggests caution. Quote, smart fox, Percy commented. He sat beside Naruto, Riptide resting across his knees. So, about this training exchange, how exactly does your chakra work? If I'm going to learn it, I should probably understand the basics. Naruto brightened at the question, always eager to discuss ninja techniques despite his own frequently unorthodox approach to them. Chakra is life energy, a combination of physical and spiritual energy that flows through specific pathways in the body. He held up his hand, concentrating to produce a small, flickering blue aura. With training, you can control it, shape it, even transform it into elements like fire or water. Percy looked skeptical. And everyone in your world can do this. Pretty much, though some have or natural talent or larger reserves than others. Naruto demonstrated a simple hand sign. These help focus the chakra for different techniques. I'm actually known for using a lot of shadow clones, Icicle duplicates that can act independently. Like splitting yourself into multiple people. Percy raised an eyebrow. That would have been useful, pretty much every day of my life. What about your powers? Naruto asked. That water manipulation thing, is that normal where you're from? Percy shook his head. No, I'm a demigod. Half human, half god. My father is Poseidon, god of the sea, so I have powers related to water. Most demigods have abilities connected to their divine parent. Gods, huh? Naruto pondered this. We have legends about gods, but I've never met one personally. Unless you count the Sage of Six Paths. But he was more like a really powerful shinobi who became mythologized. Their conversation was interrupted as Kira suddenly tensed, her attention fixed on the emptiness between islands. Movement, she warned, hand going to a weapon concealed at her hip. Nadia. Barrier. Nadia was already in motion, removing small objects from her satchel and placing them in a precise pattern around their island. Each object, they appeared to be carved. Stones with symbols etched into their surfaces, began to glow with amber light as Nadia placed them, forming a perimeter. What is it? Percy asked, uncapping Riptide and rising to his feet in one fluid motion. His question was answered as the empty space between islands rippled like disturbed water. From this distortion emerged floating shadows that only vaguely resembled humanoid shapes, as if darkness itself had been poorly folded into the approximation of a person. They had no distinct features except for eyes that gleamed with malevolent purple light. Hollow ones, Kira confirmed grimly, drawing twin short swords of silvery metal that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. They can traverse the spaces between islands by moving through dimensional pockets. Stay within Nadia's barrier. The amber light from the placed stones now connected, forming a dome of translucent energy over their position. Outside this protective hemisphere, more shadow creatures materialized, their movements jerky and unnatural as they tested the barrier's strength. Will that hold them? Naruto asked, counting at least a dozen entities surrounding their island. Temporarily, Nadia replied, maintaining a meditative posture that suggested she was actively channeling energy into the protective field. But they'll find weaknesses eventually. They always do. Then we fight, Naruto stated, drawing multiple kunai into his hands. Despite the dampening effect on his chakra, he could still enhance weapons with wind nature if he concentrated. Not ideal, Kira cautioned, but sometimes necessary. Remember, every conflict feeds information back to the devourer about your abilities. Show only what you must. The hollow ones began pressing against the barrier, their shadowy forms distorting as they sought entry points. The amber light flickered where they touched it, reading a discordant hum that set teeth on edge. Percy, Nadia called, strain evident in her voice, there's water beneath us in the island's core. Can you sense it? Percy closed his eyes briefly, extending his awareness downward. His connection to water remained the least affected of his abilities in this strange dimension. Yes, some kind of underground reservoir. What do you need? When I say so, pull it upward through the barrier, she instructed. Hollow ones are vulnerable to elemental forces not native to the Nexus. Your water should disrupt their forms temporarily. And then we run like hell. Percy guessed. Kira nodded, blades at the ready. Precisely. The settlement is within range if we push hard. Now focus. They're breaking through. The barrier shuddered as three hollow W1s synchronized their efforts against a single point, causing the amber light to dim dangerously. Nadia's face showed increasing strain as she fought to maintain the protective field. Naruto, she called, channel your chakra into the barrier, any amount you can spare. Your energy signature is foreign to them, it will confuse their attack pattern. Without hesitation, Naruto placed his hands against the inside of the energy dome. Pushing his chakra outward, the effort was more difficult than expected, like trying to mix oil and water, but where his blue energy met Nadia's amber light, the barrier strengthened. Rippling with renewed power. Clever, Kurama commented internally. Using dimensional incompatibility as a weapon. The hollow ones recoiled momentarily from the reinforced barrier, their shadowy forms rippling with what might have been confusion. The reprieve was brief. They soon began a new assault, more coordinated than before. They're adapting, Kira warned, shifting her stance. Nadia, now, Percy, Nadia commanded, simultaneously adjusting the configuration of her stone anchors. Percy thrust his hands downward, face contorting with concentration as he connected with the water deep beneath them. With a pulling gesture, He yanked upward, and the barrier briefly opened beneath their feet as a geyser of crystal blue water erupted through it, surrounding them. In a spiraling column that expanded outward through the barrier. The water struck the Hollow Ones like a physical force, their shadowy forms dissolving where it touched them, accompanied by high-pitched wailing that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "Move!" Kira shouted, already leaping toward the next island as the water continued to disrupt their attackers. Naruto Cr. Eated two shadow clones, the effort more taxing than it should have been, and sent them in opposite directions as decoys while the real group made their escape. Percy, drawing on his natural affinity, erected some of the water to follow them as a defensive measure. What followed was a frantic journey through the floating reaches, jumping, climbing, occasionally using makeshift bridges of ice that Percy created between islands. The Hollow Ones regrouped quickly, pursuing with single-minded determination, their damaged forms regenerating as they moved. "They're persistent," Percy noted between aboard breaths as they paused on a narrow spire of rock. "It's what they're made for," Kira replied grimly. "Look. There." She pointed to where the floating islands began to consolidate into a more stable landmass ahead. "The boundary ridge. Once we cross it, we're within the settlement's protective fields." The ridge appeared to be a massive shelf of stone that marked the transition from the chaotic floating reaches to more stable ground. Along its length stood what looked like carved pillars glowing with the same amber energy as Nadia's barrier stones. "Final push," Nadia encouraged, her scholarly demeanor now showing the resilience that had clearly helped her survive in this dangerous realm. "Those pillars maintain a permanent barrier that the Hollow Ones cannot penetrate." With renewed determination, they navigated the remaining islands, the Hollow Ones closing the distance behind them. As they approached the ridge, Naruto sensed movement from above, more shadow creatures descending to cut off their escape route. "Above us," he warned, throwing a kunai enhanced with wind chakra that sliced through one of the descending forms. "Keep moving," Kira ordered, engaging another Hollow One with her twin blades. Where the silvery metal cut through shadow, the creatures seemed unable to regenerate, their essence dissipating into nothing. Percy used the last of his borrowed water to create a brief shield of ice behind them, buying precious seconds. "What are those swords made of?" he asked Kira as they ran. "They're actually destroying these things." "Boundary metal," she replied between precise strikes at any shadow that came too close. "Forged at the edge of realities. Very rare, very effective, and unfortunately, not something we can easily replicate for you." "Nadia, how much further?" "The nearest pillar is 300 meters ahead," the scholar calculated, her breathing labored but controlled. "We need to reach the activation point." They sprinted across a singly solid ground as the floating islands gave way to the ridge proper. The pursuing Hollow Ones seemed to gain speed as they sensed their quarry approaching safety, their formless bodies stretching grotesquely to close the distance. Naruto, who had been conserving his chakra, made a split-second decision. "I'll hold them off," he declared, skidding to a stop and turning to face the oncoming shadows. "Get to the barrier." "What are you doing?" Percy demanded, pausing beside him. "We stick together. Trust me." Naruto grinned, his eyes briefly flashing red as he drew on Kurama's power. Even dampened, the Nine Tails chakra responded more readily than his own in this dimension. "I've got a few tricks left." Percy hesitated, clearly torn between solidarity and practicality. "Go," Naruto insisted. "I'll be right behind you." With evident reluctance, Percy nodded and rejoined Kira and Nadia in their dash toward the nearest pillar, which now glowed more intensely as they approached. Naruto turned to face the Hollow Ones, drawing deep on his connection with Kurama. A partial transformation would drain him significantly in this chakra-resistant dimension, but it should provide enough power to buy the others time. "Ready, Kit," Kurama rumbled, his energy already flowing through their shared pathways. "Always," Naruto replied, allowing the familiar burning sensation of the fox's chakra to envelop him. An orange-red aura surrounded his body, not the full cloak he could achieve in his home dimension, but enough to manifest a single chakra tail and elongated claws. His eyes shifted fully to Kurama's slitted red, and his whisker marks deepened as his canines sharpened to points. The approaching Hollow Ones paused momentarily, their eyeless faces somehow conveying confusion at this transformation. Then, As if receiving new instructions, they surged forward with renewed purpose. Naruto met them head-on, clawed hands tearing through shadow matter with satisfying effectiveness. Kurama's chakra, foreign to this dimension, seemed to disrupt the hollow ones in a way similar to Percy's water and Kira's special blades. Where he struck, their forms dissolved, unable to immediately regenerate. Not so tough now, are you? Naruto taunted, spinning through 3 attackers in a fluid motion that would have made Gai-sensei proud. The fox's chakra enhanced his speed and strength, allowing him to counterbalance the dimensional dampening effect. Still, for every shadow creature he destroyed, more seemed to form from the spaces between realities, drawn to the powerful energy he was emitting. Naruto realized he was becoming a beacon, attracting more attention the longer he fought. Naruto, Percy's voice called from ahead. The barrier's activating. Get over here. Glancing over his shoulder, Naruto saw his companions had reached the nearest pillar, which now pulsed with intensifying light. A transparent wall of energy was beginning to form between adjacent pillars, creating the promised protective boundary. Time to go, he muttered to himself, delivering one final sweeping attack that cleared a path through the encircling shadows. Then, channeling chakra to his legs, he sprinted toward the beckoning safety of the barrier. The hollow ones pursued, seemingly aware that their prey was about to escape. They stretched and contorted their forms unnaturally, reaching with elongated limbs of pure darkness. Hurry, Nadia shouted, her hands pressed against the pillar as she channeled energy into accelerating the barrier's formation. Naruto pushed harder, legs burning with effort. The barrier was nearly complete, the gap between pillars narrowing as the energy field solidified. With a final burst of speed, he dove through the diminishing opening, feeling shadowy fingers brush his ankles as he tumbled to safety on the other side. The barrier sealed completely behind him with a sound like a thunderclap, trapping the hollow ones on the far side. They pressed against the energy field, their forms distorting but unable to penetrate the boundary. Cutting it close, Percy commented, offering a hand to help Naruto to his feet. The shinobi grinned, his features returning to normal as he released Kurama's chakra. Where's the fun otherwise? Kira sheathed her blades, looking mildly impressed despite her stoic demeanor. That transformation, it's not something I've seen from shinobi we've encountered from other dimensional variants. Jinchuriki, Naruto explained, dusting himself off. I'm a vessel for Kurama, one of 9-tailed beasts from my world. It's complicated. I'd be interested to document the differences between your reality and the shinobi dimensions we've previously encountered, Nadia said, her scholarly interest evident even after their harrowing escape. The multiverse theory suggests infinite variations, but patterns do emerge. Maybe later, Percy suggested tactfully, noting Naruto's exhaustion from the chakra expenditure. I think we could all use a moment to catch our breath. And maybe some actual information about this settlement we've been running toward. Kira nodded, gesturing toward a path that wound down from the ridge into a valley below. From their vantage point, they could now see what appeared to be a small city nestled against distant mountains, a collection of buildings that somehow blended architectural styles from seemingly dozens of different cultures and time periods, all unified by their construction of the same iridescent stone that formed the ridge. Welcome, she said with a hint of pride, to Convergence, the last stable community in the Nexus dimension. Convergence defied easy categorization. As they descended the path from Boundary Ridge, Naruto and Percy found themselves entering a settlement unlike anything in their respective worlds. The buildings seemed to shift subtly as they passed, adjusting to the viewer's perception, here showing elements of Konoha's practical wooden structures. They're incorporating the classical stone of Greek architecture. The city responds to visitors, Nadia explained, noting their wonder. It reconfigures itself partially on the dimensional resonance of those within it. You'll find areas that feel almost like home alongside places entirely alien to your experience. The inhabitants proved equally diverse. Humanoid figures with varying features moved about daily tasks. Some appeared completely human, others possessed subtle differences like unusual skin tones or extra appendages, while a few were so fundamentally different in form that Naruto and Percy could only stare. Refugees and guardians from across the multiverse, Kira elaborated. Some arrived as you did, pulled through by the devourer. Others came pursuing research, adventure. or escape from their native dimensions. All coexist under Convergence's neutrality pact. The rules are simple, Nadia added as they approached what appeared to be a central plaza. No dimensional discrimination, no use of powers that could destabilize the Nexus, and mandatory contribution to community defense and resources. Sounds reasonable, Percy commented. He kept a wary eye on a being that appeared to be composed entirely of geometric light patterns that somehow conveyed a humanoid shape. They crossed the plaza, drawing curious glances from Razid, Ents who clearly recognized them as newcomers. At the center stood a structure more stable in its appearance than the surrounding buildings, a circular edifice of pure white stone with 7 spires reaching skyward, each glowing with a different colored light. The Concordance, Kira identified it. Our governing council meets there. You'll be presented to them tomorrow to be officially recognized as transients under protection. And tonight? Naruto asked, the events of the day catching up as adrenaline faded, leaving him acutely aware of his hunger and fatigue. Tonight you rest, Nadia said kindly. We've arranged accommodation at the Wayfarer's house. All newcomers stay there until permanent quarters can be assigned. She led them down a side street to a sprawling building that somehow reminded Naruto of both an inn from the Land of Fire and the barracks at Camp Half-Blood that Percy had briefly described during their journey. Its main entrance stood open, revealing a warm interior lit by softly glowing crystals similar to those they had encountered in the forest. Inside, they were greeted by a woman with silver blue hair and eyes that held the depth of ancient skies. She wore simple robes of shifting gray and moved with graceful precision that spoke of martial training beneath her hospitable demeanor. Aiko, Kira addressed her with familiar respect. We've brought guests from new dimensions. They'll require the usual orientation and accommodation. Of course. Aiko's voice carried a musical quality, her attention shifting to assess the newcomers with unnerving thoroughness. Shinobi, she noted, studying Naruto, and, she paused at Percy, her head tilting slightly. Demigod, interesting combination. Percy shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. How did you? Aiko Shimizu is a chakra specialist, Nadia explained. She can visualize energy patterns in ways beyond most practitioners. She'll be instrumental in your training exchange. You have chakra, a pathways unlike any shinobi variant I've encountered, Aiko told Naruto directly, her expression professional but with undeniable curiosity. And you, she turned to Percy, possess divine energy G natures that follow unique channels through your cellular structure. Fascinating. They need rest and food before evaluation, Kira reminded her, a hint of protectiveness in her tone that suggested a personal relationship beyond professional respect. Aiko nodded, stepping back. Of course. Follow me to your quarters. We maintain a dimensional neutral diet in the common dining hall, but if you have specific requirements or preferences, accommodations can be made. As they followed her deeper into the building, Naruto found himself walking alongside Percy, both of them processing the overwhelming series of events that had brought them here. So, Naruto said quietly, still think this is a Tuesday-level problem. Percy snorted softly, maybe upgraded to Wednesday. Ask me again after we've met this Concordance, tomorrow. He paused, then added with grudging admiration, that fox transformation thing was pretty impressive back there. Thanks, Naruto grinned. Your water control isn't bad either, for a non-chakra user. Maybe this training exchange won't be as impossible as it sounds. Maybe, Percy agreed, though his expression remained skeptical. Though I still don't understand how I'm supposed to use chakra when it doesn't exist in my world. And I don't see how swinging a sword compares to ninja techniques, Naruto countered good-naturedly. But I guess we'll find out. What's the worst that could happen? Besides our respective dimensions collapsing into each other? Percy remarked dryly. I've learned never to ask that question. The universe takes it as a challenge. Naruto laughed, the sound brightening the strange hallway. Despite the dire circumstances, he found himself oddly energized by the challenge ahead. Adapting to impossible situations had been the story of his life, after all. Little did either of them realize that beyond the protective boundaries of convergence, the Devourer had already begun adjusting its strategy, analyzing the data gathered from their brief encounter with its Hollow Ones. In the spaces between dimensions, ancient hunger stirred with renewed purpose, and the countdown to catastrophe had begun. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Art of Exchange. Morning in Convergence brought with it a peculiar quality of light, neither fully sunlight nor artificial illumination, but something between that filtered through the geometric patterns of the sky. This ethereal glow spilled through the windows of the Wayfarer's house, rousing Naruto from a sleep far deeper than he'd intended. "Ugh!" he groaned, rubbing his eyes as he oriented himself in the unfamiliar surroundings. The room he'd been assigned was spartanly furnished yet somehow comfortable, with surfaces that subtly reminded him of his apartment in Konoha while maintaining the iridescent quality common to Convergence architecture. "About time," Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind. "You've been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. 12 hours. Naruto sat up abruptly. "That's not possible. I never sleep that long. The dimensional transition and subsequent chakra expenditure took more of a toll than you realized," the fox explained. "This place, it resonates differently. Our energy requires more effort to maintain here." Naruto swung his legs over the edge of the bed, testing his physical condition. His chakra reserves felt replenished, though still somehow constrained by the dimensional properties of the nexus. "Any sign of our shadow friends while I was out?" "None within the settlement boundaries," Kurama confirmed. "The barrier appears to function as promised." However, the fox paused, an unusual hesitation. "What is it?" Naruto prompted, instantly alert. "Dreams are significant in this place," Kurama said carefully. "While you slept, I sensed other consciousnesses brushing against our shared mindscape. Nothing malevolent, but aware." "Observing the devourer?" Naruto asked, instinctively checking his equipment pook. He's where he'd placed them beside the bed. "No, different energies entirely. This dimension hosts entities beyond those we've met. Some perhaps older than myself." This information was disquieting. Kurama was among the oldest beings in Naruto's world, created by the Sage of Six Paths from the primordial 10 Tails. The idea of entities that made the ancient fox uneasy was not comforting. A knock at the door interrupted these thoughts. Naruto pulled on his jacket and called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Percy Jackson, already dressed and looking considerably more rested than when they'd parted the previous evening. "Morning, ninja boy. The others sent me to check if you were still breathing. Apparently 12 hours of sleep is concerning for someone with your energy signature." He leaned against the doorframe, casual posture belying the alert watchfulness in his sea-green eyes. Naruto grinned, stretching his arms overhead. "Just recharging. So what's the plan for today?" "Meeting this concordance thing already happened," Percy replied. They convened an emergency session at dawn when reports came in about increased Hollow One activity around the settlement. Kira represented our interests. "We've been officially classified as priority transients and assigned training resources." His tone suggested he found the bureaucracy somewhat amusing despite their dire circumstances. "What does that mean exactly?" Naruto asked, falling into step beside Percy as they left the room and moved down the hallway of the Wayfarer's house. "It means," Percy explained, "that starting immediately. We're on an accelerated training schedule. Aiko will oversee your swordsmanship training with me in the mornings, and I'll learn chakra basics from you in the afternoons. Meals, sleep, repeat until we either save multiple dimensions or fail spectacularly." "Optimistic," Naruto remarked dryly. Percy shrugged. "I've learned to manage expectations. Breakfast first, though. Dimensional heroics require calories." According to Nadia, the dining hall of the Wayfarer's house proved to be a large open space with high ceilings that seemed to reflect the geometric sky above. Various residents, some human appearing, others decidedly not, sat at tables constructed of the same iridescent stone that characterized much of Convergence. Food was served from stations along one wall, offering items that simultaneously looked familiar and strange. As they collected trays and surveyed the options, Naruto was pleased to discover something resembling ramen, though the broth glowed with a faint blue luminescence and the noodles had a spiral pattern that no cooking technique from his world could produce. Percy opted for something that approximated blue pancakes, another explaining with a shrug, "Comfort food. My mom makes them when things get weird." They found seats at a table already occupied by Nadia, who was absorbed in what appeared to be a book with moving illustrations that shifted as she turned the pages. She looked up as they sat, offering a smile that transformed her scholarly features. "The sleeper awakens," she greeted Naruto. "How do you feel?" Ready to start, Naruto replied confidently between bites of the luminescent ramen, which tasted better than its appearance suggested, somehow capturing the essence of his favorite Ichiraku flavors while adding unfamiliar notes that weren't unpleasant. Good, Nadia nodded, closing her book. Because there's been a development overnight. The dimensional instabilities between your worlds have accelerated beyond our initial projections. Percy paused mid-bite. Meaning we have less time than we thought, she explained grimly. The Devourer appears to be concentrating its efforts specifically on the boundaries between your dimensions. The original estimate of 2 weeks has been revised. How long? Naruto asked, all humor vanishing from his expression. 10 days, Nadia replied. Perhaps less. The Concordance is monitoring the degradation patterns, but the rate of collapse is unprecedented. Percy set down his fork with deliberate care. No pressure or anything. Why the rush? Naruto wondered aloud. What makes our dimensions so special to this devourer thing? Nadia hesitated, exchanging a glance with someone approaching their table. Aiko, the silver blue-haired woman from the previous evening, who carried her own tray with a carefully balanced cup of steaming liquid. May I? Aiko gestured to an empty chair, which Naruto quickly cleared of his equipment pouch. Once seated, Aiko addressed Naruto's question directly. The Devourer targets dimensional pairs with complementary energy systems. Your shinobi chakra, she nodded to Naruto, and Percy's divine energy signature. Represent opposing yet potentially harmonizing forces. The potential energy release from collapsing such dimensions would be substantial. So we're like an all-you-can-eat buffet, Percy summarized bluntly. An apt if simplistic analogy, Aiko agreed, sipping her beverage, which emitted a faint silver vapor. More concerning is that your specific variant dimensions contain power concentrations unlike others we've encountered. The nine-tailed fox, she nodded to Naruto, and the pantheon of still active gods, a nod to Percy. The Devourer may be attempting to access these power sources through you. Naruto instinctively placed a hand over his stomach where the seal containing Kurama resided. It wants the Biju, and possibly to feed on the divine energy of Olympus through me, Percy added, understanding dawning. That's just great. Interesting theory, Kurama commented internally to Naruto. And concerning if accurate, a being capable of consuming divine or tailed beast. Chakra would represent a threat beyond dimensional boundaries. Then we don't have time to waste, Naruto declared, pushing his empty bowl aside. When do we start training? Now, Aiko stated simply, rising from her seat with fluid grace. I've prepared the eastern courtyard for your swordsmanship instruction, while the western meditation garden has been reserved for afternoon chakra training. She fixed them both with an evaluating gaze. I should warn you, dimensional skills transfer is neither simple nor comfortable. You will be attempting to channel energies your bodies and minds were not designed to accommodate. Pain I can handle, Naruto assured her with the confidence of someone who had endured more than his share. Teaching might be the harder part for me. Percy raised an eyebrow. And learning is definitely mine. My ex-girlfriend called me academically challenged on my good days. Former instructional difficulties are irrelevant here, Aiko replied without humor. Survival tends to be a powerful motivational tool. She gestured toward the exit. Shall we begin? The eastern courtyard proved to be a large open space surrounded by cherry trees that bloomed with petals in impossible shades of silver and pale blue. The ground was covered with fine white sand that shifted and resettled with each step, somehow absorbing impact to prevent injury while providing stable footing. Weapon racks lined one wall, displaying blades from what appeared to be dozens of different cultural origins. This is where most physical combat training occurs in Convergence, Aiko explained, leading them to the center of the courtyard. The space is reinforced with dimensional stabilizers that prevent excessive energy discharge from damaging the settlement. Percy surveyed the area with an experienced eye. Reminds me of the arena at Camp Half-Blood, except cleaner and with fewer bloodstains. Your training facilities involve significant bloodshed? Aiko inquired, her tone suggesting academic rather than moral curiosity. Demigod Camp, Percy shrugged. Injuries happen when you're learning to fight monsters with real weapons. Our healing techniques are pretty advanced, though. Naruto was examining the weapon racks with interest, having never paid much attention to traditional swordsmanship. Shinobi used kunai, shuriken, and occasionally specialized weapons like Sasuke's blade. But formalized sword training hadn't been part of his education. The goal, Aiko stated, drawing their attention back to the task at hand, is not mastery within 10 days. That would be impossible. Rather, we seek sufficient competence for dimensional resonance, enough skill transfer to disrupt the Devourer's hold on your realities. So I don't need to become a sword master, Naruto clarified. Just good enough that it counts as learning from Percy's world. Precisely, Aiko confirmed. Similarly, Percy need not become a full-fledged shinobi, just capable of basic chakra. A manipulation that represents genuine skill transfer from your dimension. That sounds slightly less impossible, Percy admitted. Let's begin with an assessment of your current capabilities, Aiko suggested. Percy, please demonstrate basic swordsmanship forms so I can evaluate what Naruto will need to learn. Percy nodded, uncapping Riptide. The pen expanded into the full celestial bronze sword, its golden surface catching the strange light of convergence in ways that made the blade appear to glow from within. With practiced ease, he moved into stance and began a series of forms that spoke of years of training layered over natural talent. Naruto watched with genuine interest as the demigod flowed through offensive and defensive positions, the sword becoming an extension of his body rather than a separate tool. Percy's style blended what appeared to be classical Greek techniques with improvisations that had likely developed through actual combat experience. His movements held a fluid quality reminiscent of water itself, which made sense given his divine parentage. Your base is primarily Greek hoplite technique, Aiko observed, circling Percy as he demonstrated, with significant adaptations for solo combat against larger opponents. Interesting. And your weapon, it has unique properties. Celestial bronze, Percy confirmed, executing a complex feint and thrust combination. Effective against monsters and immortals, passes through regular mortals without harming them. Also returns to my pocket if I lose it, which happens embarrassingly often. Convenient, Naruto remarked. Does it work on these hollow ones? Unknown, Aiko replied. Celestial bronze doesn't exist in any dimension we've previously encountered. Its effectiveness against Nexus entities would need to be tested. Percy completed his demonstration with a final thrust and pivot maneuver before lowering Riptide. That's the basics. There's more situational stuff, but those are the fundamental movements. Aiko nodded, appearing satisfied. Now, Naruto, show us your current relationship with bladed weapons. Naruto extracted a kunai from his pouch, spinning it around his finger with kazu. Expertise before gripping it in standard shinobi fashion. We use these for throwing in close combat, he explained, demonstrating the various grips and basic strikes taught at the academy. But they're tools, not primary weapons for most shinobi. We rely more on ninjutsu, chakra techniques. He demonstrated a few combinations, his movements precise but clearly utilitarian rather than formalized. Unlike Percy's flowing style, Naruto's approach was direct and efficient, optimized for creating openings for more decisive techniques rather than winning through bladework alone. As I suspected, Aiko said after observing both demonstrations. Two fundamentally different approaches to combat. Percy, your swordsmanship is central to your fighting style, while Naruto, you view bladed weapons as supplementary tools. She turned to a nearby weapon rack. For this training to succeed, we must find middle ground. A swordsmanship style that complements Naruto's existing skills while representing genuine knowledge transfer. She selected a blade shorter than Riptide but longer than a kunai, a straight single-edged sword with minimal guard and a wrapping of dark blue around the hilt. This is reminiscent of weapons from certain shinobi dimensions, but incorporates elements that will require you to learn true swordsmanship rather than simply adapting kunai techniques. Naruto accepted the weapon, testing its weight and balance. It felt strange in his hand, neither as familiar as a kunai nor as unwieldy as he'd feared a proper sword might be. So I learned to use this, and that helps break the Devourer's hold. It's not merely about physical technique, Aiko clarified. It's about internalizing the principles behind Percy's fighting style, the philosophy of the sword as primary weapon rather than accessory. The different relationship between warrior and blade. The dimensional resonance occurs at the conceptual level, not just the physical. Percy stepped forward. So I'm teaching Naruto not just how to swing a sword, but how to think like a swordsman. Exactly, Aiko confirmed. And later, Naruto will teach you not merely how to access chakra, but how to conceptualize your self as a vessel and conduit for that energy, a fundamentally shinobi perspective. Percy turned to Naruto with a hint of challenge in his grin. Ready for lesson 1, ninja boy? Naruto matched his expression. Bring it on, fish stick. Fish stick, Percy repeated, eyebrow raised. Son of the sea god, Naruto shrugged. Too easy. Definitely too easy. I've heard better from actual fish. Air banter was interrupted by Aiko clearing her throat. While cross-dimensional camaraderie is encouraging, we have limited time. Percy, please begin with basic stance and grip instruction. For the next 3 hours, Naruto received his first formal lesson in swordsmanship. Percy proved to be a surprisingly effective teacher, breaking down movements into components and explaining the reasoning behind each position. Despite his earlier self-deprecation regarding academic matters, the demigod clearly understood his craft deeply enough to communicate its essentials. The sword isn't just a longer knife, Percy explained, adjusting Naruto's grip for the dozenth time. It's a full extension of your arm. You're not throwing it or using it to create an opening for something else, it is the technique itself. Naruto, sweating from the unaccustomed movements, nodded in understanding. In shinobi training, we're taught that tools are just that, tools for delivering chakra or creating tactical advantages. This is different. Exactly, Percy encouraged. For demigods, our weapons often define our fighting style. Annabeth uses a dagger because it suits her strategic approach to combat. I use a sword because it balances offense and defense in a way that works with my abilities. He demonstrated a defensive sweep. Try again, but think of the blade as part of your body, not something separate you're holding. Naruto attempted the movement again, focusing on the conceptual shift Percy described. To his surprise, the motion felt more natural when he stopped thinking of the sword as an object and started considering it an extension of his reach and intent. Better, Aiko observed from where she stood monitoring their progress. Your body is adapting to the new movement patterns more quickly than expected. The real challenge will come with internalizing the philosophical differences. By midday, Naruto had mastered basic stances and simple strike combinations. His natural physical prowess and combat experience allowed him to pick up the mechanical aspects rapidly, though Percy noted that he still occasionally reverted to treating the sword like an oversized kunai in dynamic movements. Enough for today's morning session, Aiko announced as the strange geometric sun reached its zenith. You will continue sword practice each morning. For now, take sustenance and prepare for the afternoon chakra training. Percy, your challenge will be considerably different. As they returned their practice weapons to the racks, Percy nudged Naruto. So, how hard is this chakra thing going to be? Scale of 1 to impossible. Naruto considered the question seriously. Honestly, most people in my world start training as children. It's like learning to write or walk. Basic chakra control is expected by the time you enter the academy at age 6 or 7. Percy's expression fell slightly. That's not encouraging. But, Naruto continued with characteristic optimism, why? Oh, you already have some kind of energy control with your water powers. That might help. Plus, you've got me as a teacher, and I learned sage techniques that took most people years to master in just a few weeks. Were you a prodigy or something? Percy asked skeptically. Naruto laughed. The opposite. I was dead last in my class. But I'm stubborn. Really, really stubborn. That, Percy said with a genuine smile, is something I understand completely. The Western meditation garden presented a stark contrast to the training courtyard. Here, geometric patterns in the stone pathways guided Visi tours through arrangements of plants that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. Small pools of water reflected the strange sky, while crystalline formations emerged from the ground at intervals, humming with barely perceptible frequencies that created a sense of peaceful resonance throughout the space. Nadia awaited them near a central arrangement of flat cushions positioned around a shallow pool. Welcome to your first chakra lesson, she greeted them. Aiko reports promising progress in the swordsmanship training. Naruto's a quick study with the physical aspects, Percy confirmed, settling onto one of the cushions as indicated. Apparently I'll need to be equally quick with this chakra business. Different challenges for different natures, Nadia observed. Naruto, O's physical adaptability serves him well with swordsmanship, while your existing connection to divine energy may provide unexpected advantages with chakra manipulation. Naruto sat cross-legged on a cushion, assuming the meditation posture that had become familiar during his sage training. How do we even know Percy has chakra pathways? In my world, everyone has them naturally, but he's from a dimension where chakra doesn't exist. An excellent question, Nadia approved. The answer lies in dimensional resonance theory. While chakra as a specific energy system may not exist in Percy's home dimension, the fundamental components that comprise chakra, physical energy and spiritual energy, exist in some form in all dimensions with living beings. So I have the ingredients, just not the recipe. Percy asked. Precisely. Nadia smiled. In your dimension, these energies express differently, perhaps as the divine connection that allows demigods to access godly abilities. Here in the Nexus, where dimensional laws blend, we can potentially reconfigure your existing energy pathways to approximate chakra circulation. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Like how I can still use some chakra here, even though it feels different and harder to control. Yes, Nadia confirmed. The Nexus allows for a certain flexibility in how dimensional constants manifest. She turned to Percy. The process begins with awareness. Before you can manipulate chakra, you must first sense it within yourself. Percy looked dubious but game. Okay, how do I do that? Close your eyes, Naruto instructed. Falling naturally into the role of teacher despite his earlier misgivings. Focus on your breathing first, just like regular meditation. Percy complied, his expression suggesting he'd done similar exercises before, though perhaps not enthusiastically. In my world, Naruto continued, we're taught to visualize our internal energy first. Imagine a warm current flowing through your body, centered around your stomach but extending to every limb. Like blood circulation? Percy asked, eyes still closed. Similar, but separate, Naruto clarified. Chakra flows through its own network of pathways alongside your blood vessels and nervous system. Percy's brow furrowed in concentration. After several minutes of silence, he sighed in frustration. I'm not feeling anything special. Just normal body stuff. Heartbeat, breathing. Nadia, who had been observing silently, now intervened. Perhaps a different approach. Percy, when you use your water abilities, how does it feel? Not the external effect, but the internal sensation. Percy considered this. Like a pulling sensation in my gut. A connection that I can extend toward any water source. It's not really conscious anymore, more like an extra sense I've developed. Excellent, Nadia encouraged. That connection is a form of energy manipulation, though different from chakra. Focus on that sensation, but instead of extending it outward toward water, try to circulate it within your own body. Percy's expression suggested skepticism, but he closed his eyes again and attempted to follow the instruction. After several minutes, his breathing slowed, and a faint sheen of concentration sweat appeared on his forehead. I feel something, he said hesitantly. Not like my water connection exactly, but similar. Like a current inside instead of outside. Naruto exchanged an excited glance with Nadia. That's it. That's the beginning of chakra awareness. Now try to focus that feeling in your center, about 2 inches below your navel. In my tradition, we call that point the tanden, the center of your chakra network. Percy adjusted his focus, his breathing becoming more rhythmic as he concentrated. To Naruto's amazement, a very faint blue glow began to manifest around the demigod's body, barely visible, but unmistakably similar to the aura of chakra manifestation. He's doing it, Naruto whispered to Nadia, who nodded with scholarly satisfaction. The Nexus facilitates the translation between energy systems, she explained quietly. His divine energy signature is adapting to the concept of chakra more readily than expected. The faint aura around Percy suddenly dissipated as his eyes flew open, his expression a mixture of surprise and accomplishment. Whoa, that was weird. Good weird, but definitely weird. Like I found muscles I didn't know I had. An apt description, Nadia approved. You've taken the first step, becoming aware of your internal energy. Now comes the more difficult part, learning to direct and shape that energy intentionally. In the academy, Naruto explained, we start with really basic exercises. The first one is usually trying to make a leaf stick to your forehead using only chakra. Percy looked at him skeptically. A leaf? Seriously? It's harder than it sounds, Naruto defended. It requires precise control to emit just the right amount of chakra. Too little and the leaf falls. Too much and it blows away. Perhaps something more aligned with Percy's existing abilities might provide a better starting point, Nadia suggested. She gestured to the small pool between them. Water is your natural element. Try directing your newly discovered internal energy toward the water's surface. Percy turned his attention to the pool, his expression becoming focused once more. So instead of my usual water control, I'm trying to use this chakra to affect the water. Exactly, Naruto confirmed. It's different from your demigod abilities. This would be manipulating water with your life energy, not your divine connection. Percy nodded and closed his eyes again, visibly concentrating on recapturing the sensation he'd experienced moments before. The minutes stretched in silence, broken only by the ambient sounds of the garden. Just as Naruto was beginning to think nothing would happen, the surface of the pool trembled slightly. It wasn't the confined NT manipulation Percy had demonstrated with his natural abilities, but a subtle ripple that suggested energy interaction rather than direct control. I felt that, Percy said without opening his eyes, his voice tight with concentration. It's like trying to pick up something with a completely different set of muscles. I can almost grasp it, but then it slips away. That's normal, Naruto encouraged. Chakra control takes practice. The fact that you can affect the water at all on your first try is actually amazing. Percy opened his eyes, looking pleased despite the minimal result. So I'm not completely hopeless. Far from it, Nadia assured him. Your progress is remarkable considering the fundamental differences between energy systems. With continued practice, you should be able to achieve basic chakra manipulation within our time frame. Which brings us to the next step, Naruto said, shifting on his cushion to face Percy more directly. Hand signs. In my world, most chakra techniques require specific hand positions to help shape and direct the energy. He demonstrated the basic 12 signs: rat, ox, tiger, hare, dragon, snake, horse, ram, monkey, bird, dog, and boar. Percy watched attentively, attempting to mimic each position with varying degrees of success. These look complicated, he observed, struggling with the tiger sign. They become second nature with practice, Naruto assured him. Think of them like formulas that tell your chakra what shape to take and what to do. Like Greek incantations for magic, Percy nodded in understanding. Specific words to channel specific effects. Yes, Naruto agreed, pleased with the analogy. Now, the simplest technique using hand signs is the transformation jutsu. It doesn't require a lot of chakra, but it does need basic control. We'll work toward that as a first goal. For the remainder of the afternoon, they focused on Percy developing awareness of his internal energy and practicing the hand signs. Progress was slow but steady. By the end of the session, the demigod could reliably produce a faint chakra aura when concentrating and had memorized most of the basic signs. You're doing great, Naruto encouraged as they concluded the day's training. Seriously, it took me forever to get even this far when I was learning. It feels like I'm trying to learn to wiggle ears I didn't know I had, Percy replied, rubbing his temples to ease the headache that had developed from the intense concentration. But I think I'm starting to get it. At least conceptually. Nadia, who had observed most of the session with scholarly interest, appeared satisfied with their progress. Both of you have exceeded expectations for a first day. The dimensional resonance is already beginning to manifest, though subtly. Is that good? Naruto asked. Does it mean we're affecting the Devourer's hold already? Not significantly yet, Nadia tempered his optimism. But it confirms our approach is valid. Continue at this pace, and meaningful disruption should be possible within our time frame. As they left the meditation garden, the strange geometric sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows that seemed to bend in impossible ways across Convergence's iridescent structures. Both warriors felt the day's training in different ways, Percy with a mental fatigue unlike anything he'd experienced. Naruto with muscle soreness from unaccustomed sword movements. Food, Percy declared as they walked back toward the wayfarer's house. Massive amounts of food, Apparently dimensional skill transfer burns calories like crazy. Agreed. Naruto nodded fervently. I haven't been this hungry since sage training. They were so focused on the prospect of dinner that neither noticed the figure watching them from the shadows between buildings, a woman with star-like gleams in her dark hair and eyes that reflected the geometric patterns of the sky above. She observed their progress with interest, before dissolving into motes of light that drifted upward and vanished among the impossible constellations forming in Convergence's evening sky. Days 2 through 5 of training followed a similar pattern, though each brought new challenges and incremental progress. Mornings were dedicated to swordsmanship, with Naruto gradually internalizing the fundamentals Percy taught him. Afternoons focused on chakra training, where Percy struggled but steadily advanced in his understanding of this foreign energy system. On the morning of the 6th day, Aiko introduced a new element to their sword training. You've mastered basic forms and combinations, she told Naruto as they gathered in the eastern courtyard. Today, we apply those skills in practical combat. Percy, who had been demonstrating a particularly complex feint and counterattack sequence, raised an eyebrow. Sparring already? Are you sure he's ready? No, Aiko replied bluntly. But readiness is a luxury our timeline doesn't permit. Naruto learns best through direct application, and you both need to accelerate your progress. Naruto grinned, spinning his practice sword with newfound familiarity. I'm game. Nothing teaches like getting hit a few times. Just remember, Percy cautioned, assuming a ready stance opposite him, no chakra techniques. Pure swordsmanship only. That's the point of this exercise. Agreed. Naruto nodded, settling into the primary stance Percy had drilled into him over the past days. And you? No water powers are demigod stuff. Wouldn't dream of it, Percy replied with a competitive smile. Ready when you are, ninja boy. Aiko moved to the edge of the training area. Begin. The initial exchange was tentative, Naruto testing his newly acquired skills, Percy gauging his student's progress. Steel rang against steel as they circled each other, the white sand shifting beneath their feet. Percy clearly held back at first, allowing Naruto to work through the forms they'd practiced. But as the shinobi demonstrated unexpected competence, the demigod gradually increased his intensity. Soon they were engaged in genuine combat, though still constrained by the parameters of the training exercise. What Percy possessed in years of swordsmanship experience, Naruto partially offset with his natural combat instincts and physical capabilities. Where Percy executed textbook combinations with fluid grace, Naruto responded with unpredictable adaptations that drew on his shinobi training. You're dropping your guard on the left again, Percy noted, demonstrating by tapping Naruto's exposed side with the flat of his blade. And you telegraph that overhead strike, Naruto countered, blocking the subsequent attack with more confidence than he'd shown previously. Their exchange continued, sweat beginning to glisten on both warriors as the intensity increased. Naruto, despite his novice status with a sword, proved a remarkably quick study, each mistake corrected almost immediately. Each successful technique incorporated into his growing repertoire. Enough, Aiko called after nearly 40 minutes of continuous sparring. Both combatants stepped back, breathing heavily but grinning with the satisfaction of productive training. Impressive progress, Naruto. Your adaptability serves you well. He's got good instincts, Percy acknowledged, capping Riptide and accepting a towel from Aiko to wipe away sweat. Keeps improvising instead of sticking to the forms, but sometimes that works in his favor. Shinobi are taught to adapt techniques to circumstances, Naruto explained, rolling his shoulder to ease a developing ache. Rigid adherence to forms gets you killed in our kind of combat. A fundamental philosophical difference between your traditions, Aiko observed. Greek swordsmanship emphasizes mastery of established forms, while shinobi combat prioritizes tactical adaptation. The dimensional resonance grows stronger as you each internalize these contrasting approaches. Speaking of which, came Nadia's voice as she entered the courtyard, we have promising developments to report. The Concordance monitoring systems have detected the first measurable disruption in the Devourers. Hold on your dimensional boundaries. Really? Percy's expression brightened. That's sooner than expected, right? Yes, Nadia confirmed, though the effect remains minor. Your training is creating ripples in the dimensional fabric, not enough to repel the Devourer yet, but proof that our approach is working. That's great news, Naruto enthused, though something in Nadia's tone gave him pause. But there's something else, isn't there? Nadia nodded grimly. The Devourer has noticed these disruptions. Hollow One activity has increased dramatically around Convergence's boundaries. They're probing for weaknesses, seeking a way past our defenses. Can they get through? Percy asked, instantly alert. Not directly, Nadia assured them. But the Concordance is concerned about potential infiltration through other means. The Hollow Ones are becoming more sophisticated in their attempts. What does that mean? Naruto pressed. They're beginning to mimic specific energy signatures. Aiko explained, attempting to disguise themselves as dimensional travelers to confuse our security systems. Which is why, Nadia continued, the Concordance has a net additional protection for your training. You've both progressed too far to risk interference. As if on cue, two new figures entered the courtyard. The first was a woman unlike any Naruto had seen before, tall and lithe with skin that seemed to contain shifting galaxies beneath its surface. Her hair floated around her head as if underwater, glimmering with points of light like stars. Her eyes, when they met Naruto's, contained entire nebulae. Beside her walked a shorter, more solidly built woman with practical clothing reinforced with what appeared to be armor in strategic locations. IPLE weapons hung from her belt and across her back, all crafted from metals that shimmered with dimensional energies similar to Kira's boundary blades. Her expression was serious, evaluating, though not unfriendly. May I present Alara Callisto? Nadia introduced the star-like woman, celestial navigator and guardian of the upper boundaries. And this is Mei Lin, weapons specialist and security coordinator for the Concordance. Star Nymph, Alara corrected with a voice that seemed to echo from vast distances despite her physical proximity. Though the term loses something in translation across dimensions. Her gaze lingered on Percy with evident curiosity. A son of Poseidon, I've encountered variants of your pantheon in other dimensions, but never quite with your specific resonance. Percy shifted uncomfortably under her cosmic scrutiny. Nice to meet you too. Mei Lin stepped forward, her practical demeanor a stark contrast to Alara's ethereal presence. I'll be overseeing security arrangements during your remaining training period, she stated matter-of-factly, her accent suggesting origins in a dimension similar to but not identical to Naruto's. Quote, the Hollow Ones are becoming more aggressive. Standard precautions are no longer sufficient. What kind of precautions are we talking about? Naruto asked, intrigued by the array of weapons the woman carried. Some resembled designs from his world, while others were completely foreign. Perimeter sensors calibrated to your specific energy signatures, Mei explained efficiently. Only those Regis-tiered in the system will be permitted within 50 meters of your training areas. Additionally, I've designed these. She removed two small objects from a pouch at her belt and held them out. They appeared to be simple braided wristbands. One predominantly orange with blue accents, the other blue with orange accents. Despite their innocuous appearance, they emanated a subtle energy that both warriors could sense. Dimensional anchors, Mei clarified as Naruto and Percy each took the wristband that matched their color scheme. They strengthen your connection to your native dimensions while simultaneously marking you as protected entities within Convergence. They also function as emergency beacons should you become separated from your escorts. And they look stylish too, Percy remarked dryly, slipping the blue band onto his wrist. The material adjusted automatically to fit snugly without discomfort. Naruto followed suit with the orange band, feeling a strange but not unpleasant vibration as it settled against his skin. So these help protect us from the Hollow Ones. They make it more difficult for the Devourer to track your movements, Alara explained, her voice somehow conveying both melody and cosmic vastness. They also complicate any attempts to mimic your energy signatures, a tactic the Hollow Ones have recently attempted. I'll be joining your morning sword training sessions, Mei informed them. My expertise includes weapons from multiple dimensions, including variants of your world, Naruto. I may be able to suggest adaptations that will accelerate your progress. And I will assist with the afternoon chakra training, Alara added. Celestial energy bears certain similarities to chakra circulation that may provide useful metaphors for Percy's understanding. Aiko nodded in agreement. The additional perspectives will be valuable, particularly as we enter more advanced training phases. Time grows short, and your progress, while impressive, must accelerate further. How short? Percy asked, his expression sobering. Nadia hesitated before answering. The latest measurements suggest dimensional collapse could begin within 6 days, sooner than our previous estimate. Then we'd better get back to work, Naruto declared, picking up his practice sword with renewed determination. What's next in sword training? Combat against multiple opponents. Mei answered before Aiko could respond. The Hollow Ones rarely attack individually. You need to develop awareness and techniques for engaging numerous adversaries simultaneously. Percy raised an eyebrow. And who exactly will be his multiple opponents? Mei smiled for the first time, the expression transforming her serious features. All of us, including you, son of Poseidon. The best way to learn is to survive being overwhelmed. Great, Naruto muttered, though his eyes gleamed with the challenge. Just like old times, the afternoon chakra session revealed equal intensification in their training regimen. The Western meditation garden had been reconfigured with additional crystalline formations that hummed at varying frequencies, creating a complex energy field that Nadia explained would amplify chakra responsiveness. Today we move beyond basic awareness and simple manifestation, she informed Percy as they settled into their now familiar positions. You've demonstrated the ability to produce chakra-like energy consistently. Now you must learn to shape it toward specific effects. Percy nodded, his expression reflecting both determination and lingering doubt. While he had indeed made progress, able now to produce a visible blue aura around his hands when concentrating, the concept of molding this energy for techniques remained elusive. We'll start with the transformation technique, Naruto suggested, having considered which basic jutsu might be most accessible for someone with Percy's particular talents. It requires precise control but not massive chakra reserves, and the effect is immediately visible, which helps with feedback. Transformation? Percy questioned. Like changing my appearance. Exactly, Naruto confirmed. In my world, it's one of the first Jutsu Academy students learn. It creates an illusion that changes how others perceive you. An illusion, Percy repeated, sounding relieved. Not actual physical transformation. That makes more sense. The hand signs are dog, boar, and ram, in that sequence, Naruto demonstrated slowly. As you form each sign, visualize your chakra changing shape inside you, following the path your hands create. Then picture clearly what you want to transform into, and release the energy in a controlled burst. Percy practiced the sequence of signs several times until the movements became fluid. What should I try to transform into? Something simple, I'm guessing. Start with a minor change to your own appearance, Alara suggested, her cosmic voice surprisingly practical. Perhaps a different hair color or clothing. Complete transformation requires more precise chakra control than you've developed thus far. Right, Percy nodded, closing his eyes to concentrate. The chakra aura manifested around him more quickly than in previous sessions, suggesting growing familiarity with the process. His hands formed the 3 signs in sequence. Dog, boar, ram. Transform, he muttered, releasing the energy in a pulse that rippled visibly through the air. A cloud of smoke, much thinner than what would typically accompany a transformation jutsu in Naruto's world, but present nonetheless, briefly enveloped Percy. When it cleared, his camp half-blood orange t-shirt had apparently changed to blue, though the effect flickered unstably. I did it, Percy exclaimed, his concentration breaking immediately and the transformation dissipating. Wait, no, I lost it. But it worked, Naruto enthused, genuinely impressed. That was definitely the beginning of a transformation jutsu. The smoke effect and everything. Nadia nodded her approval. Remarkable progress. Your divine energy appears increasingly compatible with chakra manipulation as your training continues. Try again, Alara encouraged. But this time, maintain the visualization even after the initial transformation. The technique requires sustained focus to remain in effect. Percy nodded and repeated the process. This time, the smoke was slightly more substantial, and when it cleared, not only had his shirt changed color, but his hair appeared lighter, shifting from its natural black toward a dark brown. The effect remained stable for nearly 10 seconds before flickering out. That's it, Naruto applauded. You're getting it. The transformation lasted way longer this time. Percy's expression mixed exhaustion with accomplishment. It's draining, though. Like, really draining. Is it supposed to feel like I just sprinted a mile? For beginners, yes, Naruto confirmed. Your chakra pathways aren't used to this kind of manipulation. It gets easier with practice, as the pathways become more efficient at channeling the energy. The drain is also intensified by the dimensional translation effect, Nadia explained. You're essentially forcing your native divine energy to behave like chakra, which requires additional effort. They continued practicing the transformation technique throughout the afternoon, with Percy achieving increasingly stable and complete transformations. By the session's end, he could maintain a full appearance change, hair color, clothing, and even slight facial feature alteration. For nearly a minute before exhaustion forced him to release the jutsu. You're progressing faster than expected, Alara observed as they concluded the day's training. Your connection to water as life-giving force provides a conceptual bridge to understanding chakra as life energy. It helps that I have a good teacher, Percy acknowledged, nodding toward Naruto. For someone who claims to be bad at teaching, you're pretty effective at breaking things down. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, a gesture of embarrassment that had persisted from childhood. I just remember all the things that confused me when I was learning. So I try to explain those parts better. An excellent pedagogical approach, Nadia approved. Your combined progress is creating increasingly significant dimensional resonance. The concordance monitoring systems show disruption patterns expanding beyond our initial projections. Is that enough to stop the devourer? Percy asked hopefully. Not yet, Nadia tempered his optimism. But if you continue at this accelerated pace, we may achieve sufficient disruption before the critical collapse point. The key will be maintaining momentum in both training areas simultaneously. As they departed the meditation garden, the geometric sun had already begun its descent, casting prismatic shadows across Convergence's iridescent architecture. Despite their fatigue, both warriors felt the growing sense of accomplishment that came with tangible progress. So, Percy said as they walked back toward the Wayfarer's house, I can create illusions, and you can swing a sword without dropping it. We're practically interdimensional masters already. Naruto laughed. At this rate, we'll be ready to face the devourer in, about 100 years. Such pessimism. Came a new voice from behind them, causing both to turn in surprise. The woman who approached moved with predatory grace, her steps silent despite the crystalline pathways that normally chimed softly underfoot. Her hair was midnight black, flowing loose around shoulders clad in form-fitting hunter's attire in shades of silver and deep blue. Most striking were her eyes, silver with flecks of gold that seemed to evaluate everything with the precision of a master archer gauging distance and wind. Celine, Alara greeted the newcomer with a nod that suggested professional respect rather than personal warmth. I wasn't aware you'd returned from Boundary Patrol. Just arrived, Celine replied, her gaze fixing on Percy with particular interest. The Concordance requested my involvement in the training program. Apparently, our dimensional visitors need accelerated instruction. Percy shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. You're a hunter. Among other things, Celine acknowledged. In my dimension, I served with Artemis's hunters before choosing a different path. My skills remain, however. She turned to Naruto. And you, a shinobi with a tailed beast. Fascinating combination. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know about Kurama? Information travels quickly in Convergence, Celine replied with a shrug. Particularly concerning priority transients who might save or doom multiple dimensions. Celine has been assigned to your protection detail, Nadia explained, though her tone suggested this arrangement was news to her as well. Her tracking abilities will be valuable in detecting Hollow One infiltration attempts. I'll join your training sessions beginning tomorrow, Celine informed them. Both morning and afternoon. The Concordance believes my unique perspective may prove useful in accelerating your progress. What unique perspective is that? Percy asked, his experience with Artemis's hunters making him somewhat wary. Celine's lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. I've killed things from more dimensions than most residents of Convergence have visited. Including entities similar to the Hollow Ones. She nodded to Nadia. The Concordance chamber at dawn for briefing. Yes, Nadia confirmed, though I was unaware of your involvement until now. A recent decision, Celine replied smoothly. The dimensional degradation has accelerated again. New countermeasures were deemed necessary. With that, she inclined her head to the group and departed as silently as she had appeared, moving deeper into convergence. "Well, she seems intense," Percy commented after she was out of earshot. "Selene Nightshade has a complicated history," Alara explained, her cosmic eyes following the hunter's retreat. "In her dimension, she was bound by oath to Artemis, much like the hunters in your world, Percy. But she broke that oath for reasons few know, choosing exile in the Nexus rather than facing the consequences in her native reality." Quote, "Can we trust her?" Naruto asked bluntly. "The Concordance evidently believes so," Nadia replied, though her tone carried a hint of reservation. "Her combat skills are undeniable, as is her knowledge of dimensional entities. If the situation has indeed worsened, her expertise may prove valuable." "Great," Percy muttered. "Another complication in an already impossible timeline. We should focus on what we can control," Naruto suggested pragmatically. "Our training, our progress. Everything else is just noise." "Wise perspective," Alara approved. "Rest well tonight. Tomorrow's training will intensify further as we enter the final phases of preparation." As they continued toward the Wayfarer's house, neither warrior noticed the shadow that Br. Fly rippled against the natural flow of light across a nearby building, a distortion that vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving no trace of its observation. That night, Naruto dreamed. He stood in a vast empty space unlike anything in his experience, neither the familiar mindscape where he communicated with Kurama nor any physical location he had visited. The ground beneath his feet was not solid but rather a boundary between different states of reality, rippling like the surface of a lake at the slightest movement. Above, below, and all around stretched infinite darkness punctuated by geometric patterns of light that mirrored the strange sky of convergence, but vastly larger and more complex. "Hello," Naruto called, his voice neither echoing nor dissipating but somehow expanding outward in visible ripples of sound energy. "This is not my doing," came Kurama's voice from within him, the fox sounding uncharacteristically cautious. "We've been brought to some form of dimensional boundary space." "By the Devourer?" Naruto asked, instantly alert despite knowing this was a dream. "No," Kurama assessed after a moment. "Different energy signature entirely. This feels older." As if in response to this observation, the space around them shifted. The geometric patterns rearranged themselves, flowing like cosmic currents to form a vaguely humanoid shape of pure light and mathematical precision. It towered above Naruto, its face a complex arrangement of shapes that somehow conveyed attention and intelligence without human features. "Vessel of the Nine Tails," the entity spoke. Its voice not sound but rather concepts impressed directly into Naruto's consciousness. "Traveler between dimensions. Who are you?" Naruto demanded, unconsciously reaching for chakra that responded more readily in this dream space than in the physical nexus. "Names are irrelevant across dimensional boundaries," the entity replied. "Your kind might understand me as a guardian of cosmic architecture. The Devourer disrupts the work of eons. You're not part of the Convergence, are you?" Naruto guessed. "Or the Concordance. Those are manifestations of order within the Nexus," the geometric entity confirmed. "I exist beyond, maintaining the boundaries between realities that allow existence itself to persist." "Why show yourself to me now?" Naruto questioned, sensing an immediate threat but remaining cautious. "The convergence of your dimension with the demigods creates unique instability patterns. The Devourer seeks something beyond mere energy consumption." The entity's geometric form pulsed with what might have been concern. "It pursues the power of creation itself." "Creation?" Naruto echoed, confused. "The power to create dimensions," Kurama realized, his voice rumbling through their shared consciousness. "The tailed beasts were born of the 10 tails, which the Sage of Six Paths believed originated from beyond our dimension. And Percy's gods are creators too," Naruto finished, understanding dawning. "Beings with the power to shape reality." "Precisely," the geometric entity confirmed. "The Devourer evolved from destroyer to consumer. Now, it seeks to become creator by absorbing the fundamental powers of your dimensions." "And if it succeeds?" Naruto asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Catastrophic dimensional cascade. Realities collapsed and reformed according to the Devourer's chaotic nature. Existence itself corrupted at its foundation. The entity's form briefly destabilized, geometric patterns fragmenting before recohering. Your training proceeds well but insufficient alone. You require the catalyst. Catalyst? What catalyst? Naruto pressed, sensing the entity was beginning to withdraw. Seek the forge at Convergence's heart. The weapon maker understands. The geometric being began to dissolve, its patterns flowing back into the fabric of the boundary space. The demigod dreams elsewhere. Unite your understanding when you wake. Wait, Naruto called. How do we defeat the devourer? What else do we need to know? But the entity had already dispersed, its final message rippling across boundary space like the last vibrations of a plucked string. The exchange must become synthesis. Neither sword nor chakra alone, but both transformed by understanding. The boundary space began to collapse inward, the geometric patterns swirling into a vortex that pulled Naruto toward consciousness. The last thing he heard was Kurama's thoughtful rumble. Interesting allies we find ourselves with, Kit. Let's hope they're more forthcoming with practical assistance than with clear explanations. Naruto awoke with a gasp, sitting upright in his bed at the Wayfarer's house. Dawn's peculiar light was just beginning to filter through his window, casting prismatic patterns across the iridescent walls. The dream remained vivid in his mind, unlike ordinary dreams that typically faded upon waking. A sudden pounding at his door jolted him fully alert. Naruto. Percy's voice called from the hallway. You awake? We need to talk. I just had the weirdest dream. So you saw it too, Naru. To confirmed after they had exchanged accounts of their remarkably similar dreams. They sat in a quiet corner of the Wayfarer's house dining hall, their breakfast largely untouched as they processed the implications. This geometric entity thing, though it presented itself differently to me, Percy noted. More oceanic, like living currents of energy-forming patterns. But the message was essentially identical. The devourer wants creation power, Naruto summarized, and we need some kind of catalyst from the forge at Convergence's heart, whatever that means. And something about synthesis rather than exchange, Percy added. Which sounds great and all, except nobody mentioned anything about a forge or synthesis in our training. Perhaps because they don't know, came Kira's voice as she approached their table. Nadia beside her. Both women appeared more serious than usual, with Kira's boundary guardian armor fully equipped rather than the lighter training attire she typically wore within Convergence's protected areas. Don't know what? Naruto asked as the women joined them. About the architect, Nadia explained, her scholarly demeanor tinged with awe. The entity that contacted you both through dream space is known in Convergence legends as the Architect of Dimensions, a cosmic force that established the foundational structure of the multiverse. And it's real? Percy asked skeptically. Not just some weird shared dream from dimensional jet lag or something. Very real, Kira confirmed. Though direct interventions are exceedingly rare. The Architect Typica, LLY operates through proxies or natural dimensional laws rather than direct communication with individuals. Which means, Nadia continued, that the situation is even more critical than our instruments have detected. If the architect itself is intervening, then we really are in trouble, Percy finished grimly. Great, so what's this forge it mentioned? And the catalyst? Kira and Nadia exchanged meaningful glances before Kira answered. The forge refers to Convergence's central power source, a dimensional nexus point where the energies of multiple realities naturally converge. It's where Mei Lin creates her boundary metal weapons. The catalyst, however, Nadia hesitated. That's more complicated. In theoretical dimensional physics, a catalyst would be an element that facilitates transformation between different fundamental forces, allowing energies from one dimension to fully convert to the properties of another. Like translating between languages, Naruto suggested. More fundamental than that, Nadia clarified. Not just translation but transformation, changing the essential nature of the energy itself while maintaining its power. And this would help us how exactly? Percy asked. It would allow true synthesis, Kira explained. Not just you learning chakra techniques or Naruto learning swordsmanship, but the creation of something new, a fighting style. Or technique that genuinely merges both dimensional energy systems. Naruto's eyes widened with understanding. So instead of me just swinging a sword while still thinking like a shinobi. Or me Sessing chakra while still thinking like a demigod, Percy continued. We'd create something that's both and neither, Naruto finished. A true hybrid that the devourer wouldn't recognize or be able to counter. Precisely, Nadia confirmed, but such synthesis has never been successfully achieved in recorded dimensional history. The theoretical requirements are daunting. Which explains why you didn't mention it as an option, Percy surmised. Because it's basically impossible. We focused on what we believed achievable within our constraints, Kira acknowledged without apology. The exchange approach has proven effective in previous dimensional incursions, if limited. But if the architect thinks we need synthesis, Naruto frowned thoughtfully. Then we pursue it, came Mei Lin's voice as she approached their table, her practical demeanor somehow both reassuring and intimidating. The forge awaits your visit. I received notification of your dreams an hour ago and have been preparing the necessary arrangements. You can actually create this catalyst thing? Percy asked, hope creeping into his voice. I can attempt it, Mei replied with professional caution. The theoretical framework exists. The practical application remains untested. When do we start? Naruto asked, already standing. His breakfast forgotten. Now, Mei stated simply. The dimensional degradation has accelerated again overnight. Kira, the boundary guardian, nodded grimly. The latest measurements suggest collapse could begin within 4 days, possibly sooner. The Hollow Ones have increased their attacks on the outer boundaries by 300% since yesterday. The Concordance has declared a state of dimensional emergency, Nadia added. All non-essential activities in Convergence have been suspended to channel resources toward stabilization efforts and your training. Then what are we waiting for? Percy stood as well, his expression set with determination. Let's go see this forge and figure out how to save the multiverse. Again, Naruto commented as they followed Mei Lin from the dining hall. When I was assigned to investigate a weird chakra fluctuation back home, I did not expect the day to end with interdimensional apocalypse prevention. Welcome to my life, Percy replied with a grim smile. Though usually it's just one world at stake, not the entire multiverse. I guess we're moving up in the cosmic disaster rankings. Despite the gravity of their situation, Naruto found himself laughing, a genuine sound of camaraderie that somehow lightened the burden they shared. Perhaps, he reflected, that was why the architect had brought them together specifically. Not just for their dimensional energies, but for the human qualities each brought to this impossible challenge. As they moved deeper into convergence than they had previously ventured, the settlement's architecture became increasingly complex and alien, shifting away from reflections of their native worlds toward something purely of the Nexus itself. Ahead, at what appeared to be Convergence's center, a structure unlike any other rose toward the geometric sky, a spiraling tower of iridescent material that seemed to both absorb and emit light simultaneously, creating a visual effect like living metal breathing with dimensional energy. The forge, Mei Lin announced, her typically stoic expression softening with what might have been reverence. The heart of convergence and, perhaps, your best hope for true synthesis. Inside, the multiverse's fate awaited their discovery, and the countdown to dimensional collapse continued its relentless advance. The interior of the forge defied ordinary spatial logic. What appeared from outside to be a tower revealed itself. Within is a vast chamber that seemed to extend impossibly in all directions. The ceiling soared overhead, its surface rippling with energy patterns reminiscent of the architect's geometric form. The walls, if they could be called such, shifted and flowed like liquid metal, occasionally becoming transparent to reveal glimpses of swirling dimensional currents beyond. At the chamber's center stood Wa. Chi could only be described as a forge in the most primal sense, a crucible of pure energy contained within a ring of hovering crystalline pillars. The energy within pulsed with colors beyond conventional spectrum, occasionally coalescing into recognizable forms before dissolving back into chaotic potential. This, Mei Lin explained as she led them toward the central crucible, is where dimensional energies naturally converge within the Nexus. I harness these forces to forge boundary metal, the only substance capable of permanently affecting entities like the Hollow Ones. It's beautiful, Naruto commented, genuinely awed by the cosmic display before them. And terrifying, Percy added, his expression suggesting he felt both reactions simultaneously. As most truly powerful things are. Agreed, a new voice from near the crucible. The speaker emerged from behind one of the crystalline pillars, a woman with features that seemed to shift subtly depending on the angle from which she was viewed. At first glance, she appeared middle-aged with streaks of silver in her dark hair, but moments later seemed younger, her movements suggesting both wisdom and vitality. Her attire was practical, heat-resistant materials reinforced with what appeared to be the same boundary metal that comprised Kira's weapons and May's armor. This is Alara, May introduced her, though not the Alara you've been training with. This is her progenitor, you might say. Original, the woman corrected with a smile that somehow conveyed vast age despite her youthful appearance. Star nymphs experience time differently than most beings. What you perceive as one entity may be multiple temporal manifestations of the same core consciousness. Percy blinked. So the Alara helping with our training is a younger aspect of myself. Alara confirmed. I exist simultaneously at multiple points in my personal timeline, all connected through stellar consciousness. It can be confusing for linear beings, I understand. That's putting it mildly, Percy muttered. Naruto, who had encountered his fair share of unusual entities and time-space manipulation, took this revelation more in stride. You work with May at the forge. I provide certain cosmic perspectives that enhance the forging process, Alara explained. Boundary metal requires more than physical crafting, it needs dimensional oncho. Ring that only stellar consciousness can facilitate. We've come about creating a catalyst, May stated, bringing the conversation back to their urgent purpose. The architect has communicated directly with our dimensional visitors. Synthesis rather than exchange is required. Alara's expression grew serious, the stars visible beneath her skin pulsing with increased intensity. The architect itself. Then matters are even more dire than we realized. She turned her cosmic gaze to Naruto and Percy. You understand what synthesis means. The risks involved. Not entirely, Naruto admitted. No, it's about truly merging our dimensional abilities rather than just learning each other's techniques. It is that, Alara confirmed, but much more fundamental. True synthesis requires breaking down the dimensional barriers within yourselves, allowing your native energies to intermingle at their core. The process is not without danger. What kind of danger are we talking about? Percy asked cautiously. Identity dissolution, May answered bluntly. In the most extreme cases, synthesis candidates have lost their connection to their native dimensions entirely, becoming beings of the Nexus, unable to return home. That's not ideal, Percy understated, exchanging a concerned glance with Naruto. There are less severe risks as well, Alara continued. Temporary energy instability, chakra network disruption, divine connection interference, all manageable with proper preparation and guidance. And if we don't attempt synthesis? Naruto asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Then based on current degradation rates, both your dimensions will begin catastrophic collapse within 4 days, May stated with clinical precision. Followed by cascading failures across connected dimensional branches. So it's risk personal dissolution or guarantee multiple apocalypses, Percy summarized. Not much of a choice. There rarely is when the multiverse is at stake. Alara observed with the calm of someone who had witnessed cosmic cycles beyond mortal comprehension. Naruto stepped forward, his expression resolute. I'm willing to take the risk. My entire life has been about protecting my precious people. If my world is in danger, there's no choice to make. Percy nodded in agreement. Same here. I've faced worse odds for less important stakes. What do we need to do? May moved toward the crucible, gesturing for them to follow. The catalyst must be forged from elements native to both your dimensions, combined with Nexus energy as a binding agent. Do you carry anything from your home worlds? Physical objects that hold significance? Naruto touched his forehead protector, the metal plate engraved with Konoha's leaf symbol worn smooth from years of use. It represents my connection to my village and my promise to protect it. Percy reached into his pocket and extracted a small object, a pearl that gleamed with subtle iridescence. From my father's domain. He gave it to me years ago during my first quest. Perfect, May approved. Both items carry strong dimensional resonance tied to your personal identities. Alara, prepare the stellar anchor while I calibrate the crucible. What followed was a complex ritual unlike anything either warrior had witnessed. May approached the energy crucible and began manipulating crystalline controls that hovered around its perimeter, causing the dimensional energies within to shift and coalesce into more stable patterns. Meanwhile, Alara moved in what appeared to be a dance, her movement leaving trails of stellar light that formed complex geometric patterns in the air around the forge. Place your items on the offering plate, May instructed, indicating a disk of boundary metal It had emerged from the floor before the crucible. With some hesitation, both Naruto and Percy placed their treasured objects on the plate. Immediately, the disk began to glow, scanning the items with energies that mapped their dimensional signatures in visible waves of light. Now comes the difficult part, Alara announced, completing her stellar pattern which now surrounded all of them in a complex three-dimensional matrix of light. You must each contribute your native energy directly to the forging process, chakra from Naruto, divine essence from Percy. How exactly do we do that? Percy asked. Focus your energy into your hands, May instructed, as you would when practicing your respective techniques. Then, when I signal, place your hands into the energy streams I will create from the crucible. Will it hurt? Naruto questioned, not out of fear for himself but concern for the process's success. Intensely, Alara confirmed without sugar-coating. You will be exposing foundational energies to dimensional forces typically mediated by physical and spiritual buffers. Those buffers will be temporarily bypassed. Great, Percy muttered. Just another Tuesday. Naruto grinned despite the tension. That's becoming our motto, isn't it? May activated a final sequence of controls, causing two streams of the crucible's chaotic energy to extend outward, hovering before Naruto and Percy like living tendrils of dimensional force. Prepare yourselves. Channel your energy now, and on my mark, make contact with the streams. Naruto closed his eyes, centering himself as he had countless times before. He reached deep within, past the normal chakra pathways to the core of his energy, the place where his own spiritual and physical energies merged with Kurama's ancient power. Be careful, Kit, the fox cautioned. We're attempting something unprecedented even by my standards. Together, right, Naruto replied internally. Always, Kurama confirmed, allowing his chakra to flow freely into their shared network. Beside him, Percy had also closed his eyes, concentrating on the connection that linked him to his divine heritage. Unlike chakra, which flowed through specific pathways, Percy's divine essence existed at the cellular level, a fundamental part of his being that normally activated instinctively rather than through conscious direction. I can sense the dimensional signatures aligning, Alara announced, her voice taking on harmonic overtones as her stellar consciousness expanded to encompass the forging process. May, now, contact the streams, May commanded sharply. Both warriors thrust their hands forward simultaneously, fingers extending into the writhing tendrils of dimensional energy. The effect was immediate and overwhelming, pain, beyond ordinary physical sensation as the primal forces of the crucible connected directly with their core energies. Naruto felt as though every cell in his body had ignited, chakra pathways expanded beyond their natural limits as nexus energy flowed backward through the connection. Beside him, Percy experienced a similar agony, his divine essence responding to the dimensional current with power that manifested as crackling arcs of blue-green energy across his skin. Hold, May shouted over the increasing roar of energy. Maintain the connection. The forehead protector and pearl on the offering plate began to glow. Then levitate, rising to hover between the crucible and the two suffering warriors. The items slowly moved toward each other, their molecular structures visibly breaking and intermingling as the dimensional energies rewove them into something new. The synthesis is beginning, Alara announced, her form now almost entirely stellar, physical features replaced by cosmic manifestation. Their energies are harmonizing through the catalytic matrix. Indeed, where Naruto's chakra, visible now as swirling blue energy with crimson undertones from Kurama, met Percy's div. In essence, manifesting as sea-green power with golden highlights, the two forces no longer repelled each other as dimensional opposites. Instead, they began to intertwine, creating spiraling patterns of entirely new energy that was neither chakra nor divine power but something unprecedented. The catalyst is forming, May called out, her focus absolute as she manipulated the crucible's energies with precise gestures. Alara, stabilize the stellar matrix. The star nymph's cosmic form pulsed in response, the geometric patterns surrounding them contracting to contain the increasingly chaotic energy exchange. Dimensional boundaries thinning, she reported, her voice echoing as if from multiple points in space-time simultaneously. Core essence transfer at 60% and accelerating. The pain had become almost unbearable, transcending physical sensation into something that challenged their very sense of self. Naruto felt as if he were simultaneously expanding beyond his body and compressing into an infinitesimal point. His consciousness stretching across dimensional boundaries. Stay anchored, Naruto. Kurama's voice cut through the chaos. Focus on who you are, your precious people, your promises, your ninja way. Through the dimensional maelstrom, Naruto caught Percy's eye. The demigod was clearly experiencing similar torment, his face contorted with effort as he struggled to maintain his identity amidst the cosmic forces pulling at his essence. Yet in that shared glance, both warriors found renewed determination, a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose that transcended their different origins. On the offering plate, their treasured items had completely dissolved into pure energy, reconstituting into a new form that pulsed with combined power. The chakra, infused metal of Naruto's forehead protector and the divine essence of Percy's pearl merged, forming a crystalline structure that resembled neither input but incorporated aspects of both, a translucent material with swirling internal patterns that mirrored the energy now flowing between the two warriors. Synthesis achieving critical threshold, Alara announced, her stellar form contracting further. To channel the excess dimensional energy safely. Prepare for catalyst materialization. On my mark, May instructed, her hands dancing across the crucible controls with increasing urgency, with D. Raw from the energy streams simultaneously. Not before, not after, exactly together. 3, 2, 1, mark. With tremendous effort, Naruto and Percy pulled their hands back in perfect synchronization. He energy streams snapped back toward the crucible, carrying with them portions of each warrior's native power. The crystalline structure on the offering plate pulsed once, twice, then shattered into two identical objects that hovered momentarily before dropping gently back to the disk's surface. The chamber fell suddenly silent, the roaring energies subsiding to their normal state as May powered down the crucible and Alara allowed her stellar matrix to dissipate. Both warriors collapsed to their knees, exhausted beyond ordinary fatigue, a bone-deep weariness that suggested they had expended more than physical energy in the forging process. It is done, May stated, the simple declaration belying the monumental achievement they had just witnessed. What are they? Naruto managed to ask between labored breaths. Gesturing weakly toward the objects on the plate, May approached the offering disc, examining the results with professional assessment. Dimensional catalysts, she confirmed, carefully lifting the objects for closer inspection. The first ever created from these specific dimensional energies. The catalysts appeared as crystalline bands sized to fit around the wrist. Similar in basic form to the anchors May had given them previously. Unlike those simple braided designs, however, these pulsed with internal light that shifted between blue, green, gold, and crimson, the combined energies of both warriors' dimensional signatures. Within the translucent material, symbols from both worlds appeared and dissolved in constant flux. Konoha's leaf insignia, Neptune's trident. Spiraling patterns reminiscent of Rasengan, waveforms suggesting oceanic power. They're beautiful, Percy commented, slowly regaining his strength. But how do they work? The catalysts will allow true synthesis of your dimensional abilities, Alara explained, her form gradually returning to its more humanoid appearance though still shimmering with stellar energy. When worn, they create a permeable boundary between your native energy systems, allowing controlled transfer and transformation between chakra and divine power. In practical terms, May continued, handing each warrior their catalyst. Naruto will be able to incorporate aspects of divine energy into his chakra techniques, while Percy will be able to infuse his combat style with chakra principles. The Reisul Chi should be techniques that exist outside the Devourer's dimensional understanding. Naruto examined his catalyst with wonder, feeling the combined energies pulsing in harmony with his own chakra network. So I'll be able to use Percy's water abilities. Not exactly, Alara clarified. You won't directly access his specific divine powers, nor will he suddenly perform your exact jutsu. Rather, he fundamental principles and energies will blend, allowing new techniques that incorporate elements of both dimensional systems. Like chakra-enhanced swordsmanship that carries divine impact, Percy suggested. Beginning to understand, or water techniques that follow chakra manipulation principles rather than divine command. Precisely, May confirmed with approval. The specific manifestations will depend on your creativity and how deeply you've internalized each other's combat philosophies during your training. Naruto slipped the catalyst onto his wrist, gasping slightly as it bonded with his energy. Unlike the simple anchor bands, this merger felt profound, as if a new dimension of awareness had opened within his consciousness. Beside him, Percy experienced a similar reaction, his sea-green eyes widening with surprise as the catalyst integrated with his divine essence. I can feel everything differently, Percy marveled. Like I'm suddenly aware of energy pathways I never knew existed. And I can sense water in a completely new way, Naruto added with equal amazement. Not controlling it like you do, but understanding it as part of a larger energy system. The synthesis has begun, Alara stated, satisfaction evident in her cosmic voice. But this is merely the foundation. You must now learn to actively utilize these new connections, to create techniques had truly merge your dimensional abilities. How much time do we have? Percy asked, his expression sobering as he remembered the urgency of their situation. 3 days at most, May replied without softening the truth. The dimensional degradation continues to accelerate. The Concordance reports increased Hollow One activity throughout the Nexus, suggesting the Devourer senses the threat you now represent. Then we'd better get back to training, Naruto declared, rising to his feet with renewed determination despite his exhaustion. But differently now, no more separate sword training ND chakra lessons, we need to develop our synthesis techniques together. Agreed, Percy nodded, standing as well. No point having these fancy new catalysts if we don't figure out how to use them properly. The Eastern Courtyard has been reconfigured for your final training phase, May informed them. Hira, Aiko, and the others await your return. I will join you shortly after completing the post-forging stabilization protocols here. Quote, as they prepared to leave the forge, Alara approached them, her cosmic form now mostly returned to its humanoid appearance though stars still gleamed beneath her skin. A warning before you go, she said, her voice carrying the weight of stellar wisdom. The catalysts connect you not only to each other's dimensional energies but, in a very real sense, to each other. What affects one will increasingly affect both as the synthesis deepens. Meaning, Percy prompted when she paused. Meaning, Alara continued, that should one of you fall to the Devourer or its Hollow Ones, the other will be dramatically weakened, perhaps fatally. Your fates are now intertwined beyond mere alliance. Remember this when facing the challenges ahead. Great, Naruto commented with grim humor. No pressure or anything, just another interdimensional Tuesday, Percy agreed with a matching expression. Let's go save the multiverse. The transformation in their training over the following days was nothing short of revolutionary. With the catalysts facilitating dimensional synthesis, techniques that had previously seemed impossibly foreign now flowed with increasing naturalness. The Eastern Courtyard became their primary training ground, where all their instructors gathered to witness and guide the unprecedented development of truly hybrid combat abilities. The chakra flows through the sword movement itself, Aiko instructed as Naruto practiced a sequence of strikes with his newly enhanced blade. Don't think of it as separate components, the weapon and the energy are unified through the catalyst. Naruto nodded in understanding, feeling the difference profoundly. Where before he had been learning to use a sword while still thinking like a shinobi. Now the blade felt like a natural extension of his chakra network, a conduit for energy that moved with the same fluid intentionality as his jutsu. Like this, he asked, executing a series of strikes that left visible trails of chakra in the air, not simply wind nature applied to the blade as he might have done before, but a true integration where the sword movements themselves shaped and directed the energy. Excellent, Hira approved from where she observed. The boundary resonance is significantly stronger with each successful synthesis technique. Nearby, Percy worked with Nadia and Era on a parallel development, incorporating chakra principles into his water manipulation. Instead of simply commanding water through his divine connection, he now shaped it using adapted hand signs and chakra-like circulation, creating effects that neither pure divine power nor traditional ninjutsu could achieve alone. The hand signs serve as both focus and formula, Nadia explained as Percy Foe. RMED, a modified version of the tiger sign. They help structure the divine energy through chakra pathways created by the catalyst. Percy completed the sequence: tiger, modified water, ram, and the moi. Stir in the air around him coalesced not into the simple sphere he might have created with his natural abilities, but into a complex geometric formation that rotated with increasing speed. Water style. Divine vortex. He named it spontaneously, then directed the technique toward a training dummy. The water formation struck with precision, delivering concentrated impact rather than the widesprea. D-force typical of his usual water attacks. The control is remarkable, Alara observed, her cosmic eyes analyzing the energy patterns. True synthesis rather than mere combination. The devourer will find such techniques difficult to counter as they exist outside established dimensional parameters. Selene Nightshade, who had been silently observing from the courtyard's perimeter, now approached with evident interest. The catalyst effect exceeds projections, she noted, her silver-gold eyes evaluating both warriors with calculated assessment. The boundary disruption readings have improved by 43% since implementation. Is that enough? Naruto asked, lowering his sword after completing another successful synthesis technique. Getting closer, Hira replied, checking readings on her wrist device. The concordance estimates you need to achieve approximately 70% disruption to fully break the devourer's hold on your dimensional boundaries. You're currently at 58% and climbing steadily. The rate of improvement is encouraging, Aiko added, but time remains our most precious and limited resource. The latest boundary scans suggest demency. Onal collapse could begin within 48 hours. Then we train harder, Naruto declared with characteristic determination. What's next? Combined combat application, Mei suggested as she entered the courtyard. Having completed her work at the forge, your individual synthesis techniques are developing well, but the maximum disruption effect will come from coordinated deployment. You mean like combination attacks? Percy clarified, working together instead of just individually. Precisely, Mei confirmed. The catalysts create resonance between your dimensional energies. That resonance amplifies when you synchronize your techniques in combat. What followed was the most challenging phase of their training yet, learning to coordinate their newly developed synthesis techniques into cohesive combination attacks. Unlike traditional teamwork, which might simply involve complementary but separate abilities, this required precise synchronization of their catalysts, dimensional resonance. Feel the connection through the catalysts, Alara instructed as they attempted their first coordinated technique. Your energies should harmonize rather than simply coincide. Naruto and Percy stood back to back in the center of the courtyard, catalysts glowing with increasing brightness as they focused on the connection between them. Rather than separate meditation, they now entered a shared consciousness space facilitated by the dimensional synthesis, each becoming aware of the other's energy as if it were an extension of their own. Ready? Naruto asked, raising his chakra-enhanced sword. Ready, Percy confirmed, completing a sequence of modified hand signs. Together, they executed a synchronized movement, Naruto spinning in a full circle with his blade extended while RCY released his divine vortex technique in the opposite rotation. The energies collided not in cancellation but in amplification, creating a spiraling dome of combined power that expanded outward with controlled force. Dimensional Typhoon, they named it simultaneously, the shared consciousness effect of the catalysts resulting in synchronized thought as well as action. Remarkable, Nadia breathed, monitoring the energy output. The disruption effect is nearly double what your separate techniques produced. The devourer will find such combinations extremely difficult to counter, and potentially fatal if deployed correctly. Selene added with professional approval. The boundary disruption creates vulnerability in dimensional entities like the Hollow Ones and, theoretically, the devourer itself. Throughout the remainder of the day and well into the night, they developed and refined additional combination techniques, each more seamlessly integrated than the last. The physical exhaustion was tremendous, but the results justified the effort. with each successful synthesis, the dimensional disruption percentages climbed steadily higher. By dawn of what would be their final full day of training, they had achieved remarkable progress. Naruto could now execute sword techniques that incorporated not just chakra but aspects of divine water energy, creating blades of liquid chakra that cut through dimensional boundaries. Percy had developed jutsu-like techniques that channeled his divine essence through chakra formulations, allowing precision and versatility beyond his natural abilities. Most importantly, their combination attacks had evolved from simple synchronized techniques to true dimensional fusion, abilities that existed only through their catalyst connection and DEFIED categorization in either of their native systems. 68% disruption, Kira announced after their morning session, checking the latest readings from the concordance monitoring systems. Nearly at the theoretical threshold for breaking the Devourer's hold. With continued development today, you should cross the 70% mark by nightfall. And then what? Percy asked. Ping sweat from his brow after a particularly intensive combination technique. We just wait for the Devourer to give up and release our dimensions. Unfortunately, no, Nadia replied, her expression grave. Achieving the disruption threshold merely creates the conditions for confrontation. To permanently break the Devourer's hold, you must face it directly in the boundary void. The what now? Naruto questioned. The space between dimensions where the Devourer maintains its primary form, Alara explained, her cosmic appearance more pronounced than usual as she discussed these fundamental aspects of reality. Neither fully in the nexus nor in any specific dimension, the boundary void is where realities connect and where the Devourer can be directly engaged. And how exactly do we get to this void place? Percy asked with understandable concern. The concordance has been preparing a dimensional gateway, Kira informed them. Once you achieve sufficient disruption capability, we can open a controlled tear into the boundary void. You would enter, confront the Devourer with your synthesis abilities, and, if successful, sever its connection to your dimensions permanently. If successful, Naruto repeated, catching the crucial qualifier, and if not, a heavy silence fell over the courtyard before Mei answered with characteristic directness. If unsuccessful, you would likely be consumed by the Devourer. Your dimensional energies absorbed into its being. The catalysts would shatter, and your home dimensions would collapse shortly thereafter. So no pressure, Percy remarked dryly. Just the fate of multiple dimensions resting on us figuring out how to fight an entity that exists between realities, using abilities we've only just started to develop. When you put it that way, Naruto grinned despite the gravity of their situation, it sounds like the kind of impossible odds we both specialize in. True, Percy acknowledged with a matching expression. Though, I usually get more than 10 days to prepare for apocalypse prevention. You've both faced and overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser individuals, Aiko observed, her professional demeanor softening slightly. The architect would not have connected your dimensions if success were impossible. The remaining question, Celine interjected, her calculative gaze shifting between the two warriors, is whether you'll be ready by tomorrow. The dimensional degradation has accelerated again overnight. The concordance estimates collapse could begin within 36 hours. Sooner than previously projected. Then we'd better make today's training count, Naruto declared, his catalyst glowing brightly as he channeled determination into renewed energy. What's our focus for the final phase? Combat application against actual opponents, Kira replied, drawing her boundary blades. You've mastered the techniques in controlled conditions. Now you must learn to deploy them under pressure against adversaries attempting to counter your movements. Simulated hollow ones, Percy guessed, uncapping Riptide. Better, Celine smiled, the expression somehow predatory as she drew twin curved knives from sheaths at her back. Us, all of us. The warriors looked around to see all their instructors preparing for combat, Kira with her boundary blades, Aiko shifting into a combat stank. That suggested chakra technique preparation, Mei drawing multiple weapons from her extensive arsenal. Nadia removing what appeared to be a collapsible staff from her robes, Alara's form shifting further toward her cosmic manifestation. And Celine testing the edge of her hunting knives with practiced precision. Well, Percy commented to Naruto, catalyst activating as he prepared for the most challenging training session yet. You did say you learn best by getting hit a few times. I did say that, didn't I? Naruto agreed, raising his synthesis-enhanced sword with newfound confidence. Let's show them what we've learned. The final day of training had begun, and with it, the last preparation before facing the Devourer itself. The fate of multiple dimensions hung in the balance as two warriors from different realities prepared to challenge a cosmic entity with powers only beginning to understand. Just another Tuesday in the multiverse. The boundary void defied conventional description. It existed as neither space nor absence, neither light nor darkness, but something more fundamental, the raw fabric between realities where dimensional laws themselves were malleable concepts rather than fixed constants. Within this impossible non-place, the Devourer had evolved over countless eons from simple dimensional parasite to complex entity capable of manipulating the very boundaries it inhabited. Its form, insofar as it could be said to possess one, resembled a vast writhing darkness shot through with geometric patterns of sickly purple light, an anti-architect whose purpose was consumption rather than creation. The Devourer had no consciousness as embodied beings would understand it, yet it possessed awareness, a predatory intelligence focused solely on identifying, isolating, and consuming dimensional energy. Recently, that awareness had detected something unprecedented, a resonance pattern that threatened its carefully cultivated feeding grounds. Two dimensions, CTED through its own actions yet now generating disruptive energy that undermined its control. Two beings, insignificant individually, who had somehow achieved partial synthesis of dimensional forces that should have remained incompatible. A catalyst, forged through means the Devourer could not fully comprehend, creating effects outside its extensive experience. If the entity had been capable of emotion, it might have felt concern. Instead, it simply adjusted its consumption patterns, diverting additional resources toward neutralizing this unexpected threat. The Hollow Ones, extensions of its own essence projected into the Nexus, were reconfigured with new parameters, designed specifically to counteract the disruptive resonance generated by the dimensional visitors. Yet even as it implemented these countermeasures, the Devourer sensed a shift in the fundamental balance it had long exploited. The architect, normally content to maintain cosmic structure through natural laws rather than direct intervention, had somehow involved itself in this conflict. The implications were significant. In the not space of the boundary void, the Devourer began gathering its diffuse essence, consolidating power in preparation for the confrontation it now recognized as inevitable. The dimensional travelers would come, must come, if they hoped to save their native realities. And when they did, the Devourer would be waiting, ready to consume not just their energies but the unprecedented synthesis they had achieved. Such a feast would provide power beyond any it had previously absorbed, perhaps enough to finally challenge the architect itself for control of the dimensional boundaries. The thought, insofar as the entity could formulate such a concept, was satisfying in a primal way that transcended ordinary hunger. The Devourer waited, patient as only a cosmic entity could be, as the countdown to confrontation continued its inexorable advance. Chapter 2 End.